Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Ezra Blackwood, and I'm 32 years old. Living in Montreal has its perks, but the constant noise and hustle eventually gets to you. That's why I decided to take a solo trip to Ontario's Algonquin Provincial Park. I'd heard about abandoned fire lookout towers scattered throughout the wilderness there, relics from decades past when forest rangers would spend months scanning the horizon for smoke. The idea of spending a few nights in one of these forgotten sentinels appealed to my need for solitude and adventure. I packed my Subaru Forester with enough supplies for a week: tent as backup, food, water purification tablets, first aid kit, and my camera equipment. Photography was my escape from my job as a software developer, and capturing these decaying monuments was too good an opportunity to pass up. The drive from Montreal took about 6 hours, with the last stretch on increasingly narrow and rough roads. My research had revealed an unmarked tower about 3 miles off the East Gate hiking trail. It wasn't on any official maps anymore, which meant it would be untouched by the typical tourists. Perfect. I arrived at the trailhead as the afternoon sun filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the parking area. The air smelled of pine and something earthier, primordial. The hike was more demanding than I'd anticipated. The trail existed only in the most technical sense, with fallen trees and dense undergrowth frequently forcing me to find alternative routes. My backpack felt heavier with each step, and I began wondering if this adventure had been a mistake. Just as doubt was setting in, I spotted it, a steel skeleton rising above the tree line, silhouetted against the darkening sky. The tower stood approximately 100 feet tall, rusty but remarkably intact. A narrow staircase zigzagged up to a small cabin at the top, windows broken but structure sound. I paused at the base, neck craned upward, admiring this forgotten sentinel. Something about it seemed off, not just abandoned but deliberately forsaken. The ground around it was eerily clear of vegetation, as if nothing would grow in its shadow. The climb up the metal stairs was nerve-wracking. Each step creaked under my weight, and loose bolts rattled ominously in the growing wind. Halfway up, I noticed strange markings carved into the metal supports, symbols I didn't recognize, but which appeared deliberately etched rather than random vandalism. I snapped a few photos, making mental notes for later research. The cabin at the top was surprisingly spacious, about 15 feet square with windows on all sides offering a panoramic view of the surrounding wilderness. The sunset painted the forest in brilliant oranges and reds, hiding whatever secrets might lurk beneath the canopy. I set up my sleeping bag, camp stove, and other essentials, feeling a growing sense of accomplishment. This was exactly the isolation I had been craving. As darkness fell, I noticed something unusual. No sounds of wildlife. No owls, no rustling, not even insects. The forest had gone completely silent, as if holding its breath. I told myself it was just the elevation playing tricks on my ears. I heated up some beef stew and ate while watching stars emerge in the expansive sky above. The isolation felt profound, magnificent. Just me and miles of uninhabited wilderness. I fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the journey and lulled by the gentle swaying of the tower in the night breeze. My dreams were vivid and bizarre, visions of fire sweeping across the forest, of figures standing motionless among burning trees, looking up at me with faces I couldn't quite make out. I woke several times, disoriented, convinced I could smell smoke. But each time I checked, the forest was still and dark below me, revealing nothing. Morning revealed a landscape shrouded in mist. I made coffee on my portable stove, savoring the quiet as I planned my day. Photography at dawn, exploring the surrounding area, then back to my elevated sanctuary by nightfall. Simple. Perfect. But as I scanned the horizon with my binoculars, something caught my eye. Another tower, perhaps 2 miles northeast. That wasn't on any of my maps. I decided to hike over and check it out. After securing my valuables in my backpack and locking the hatch to the cabin, I descended the creaking stairs. Each step down felt like the tower was reluctantly releasing me. Once on solid ground, I pulled out my compass and headed northeast through the dense undergrowth. The forest felt different in daylight, less threatening, but somehow more watchful. About halfway to my destination, I discovered a small clearing with the charred remains of a campfire. Recent, maybe from the past week. Strange, this area wasn't on any camping trails. Beside it lay a tattered notebook, its pages water-damaged but still legible. The handwriting was frantic, entries detailing observations of movements in the tower at night and voices in the radio static. The final entry simply read, "They're not forest rangers. Never were." I should have turned back then. Warning signs don't get much clearer. Instead, curiosity pushed me forward. The second tower appeared suddenly through the trees, identical to mine, but in worse condition. Its base was overgrown with strange fungi I couldn't identify, bulbous, blackish growths that seemed to pulse ever so slightly. The air around it smelled wrong, metallic and sweet simultaneously. My camera captured everything while a voice in my head screamed to leave. I found a small metal plaque near the base, partially obscured by moss. Observation Post 17B, established 1952, decommissioned 1974. Below that, scratched more recently, "Do not climb. Do not stay after dark." My heartbeat quickened as I looked up the dizzying height of the structure. Something moved behind one of the broken windows, just a shadow, there and gone too quickly to identify. Making my way back to my tower took longer than expected. The forest seemed to shift around me, familiar landmarks appearing out of place. Twice I found myself walking in circles despite following my compass. When I finally spotted my tower again, relief washed over me, until I noticed someone had climbed the stairs and was now sitting in my cabin. I ducked behind a tree, watching. The figure remained motionless, staring outward, face indistinguishable at this distance. By the time I mustered the courage to approach, the figure was gone. I searched the area, no footprints, no disturbed underbrush indicating someone's descent. The hatch to the cabin was still locked from the outside, exactly as I'd left it. Inside, everything remained untouched, except for my journal, which now lay open to a blank page with a single word written in handwriting not my own: leave. I should have heeded that advice. Instead, I convinced myself it was just another hiker playing tricks. I reinforced the hatch lock with some spare wire from my pack and set up a makeshift alarm using my cooking pots. If anyone tried to enter during the night, I'd know. As dusk approached, my radio, which had been silent all day, suddenly crackled to life with static and broken fragments of conversation. 17 active sites, bioaerosolization complete, subjects responding, maintain observation protocols. The transmission cut off abruptly when I touched the radio. I checked the batteries, finding them nearly drained despite being new when I left Montreal. Outside, the mist had returned, thicker now, climbing the tower like ghostly fingers reaching for the cabin. As darkness fell completely, I noticed pinpricks of light moving through the distant forest. Flashlights, perhaps? But they moved too synchronously, too purposefully. Whatever they were heading in my direction. I woke to the sound of scratching. Not the innocent scurrying of a forest creature, but deliberate, rhythmic dragging against the metal exterior of the tower. Checking my watch, 3:17 a.m. The scratching moved around the cabin's perimeter, testing each wall, each window. I lay paralyzed in my sleeping bag, breath shallow, eyes straining against darkness so complete it felt solid. My flashlight revealed nothing through the windows, just an impenetrable wall of mist that had climbed all the way up the tower. The scratching continued, now accompanied by a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure itself. I fumbled for my phone. No signal, of course, and opened the camera, hoping its night vision might reveal something the human eye couldn't. The image on the screen showed vague, elongated shadows moving across the windows, leaving strange residue in their wake. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. I didn't sleep again, maintaining my vigil with a knife clutched in one trembling hand. When first light finally broke through the mist, I inspected the cabin's exterior. The windows were covered with an oily substance that formed distinct patterns, not random smears, but deliberate symbols similar to those I'd spotted on the tower supports. I documented everything with my camera, hands shaking so badly some shots came out blurred. The radio crackled again without warning. Subject in Tower 12 showing heightened awareness. Implement containment protocol. A different voice responded. Negative. Continue observation phase. Sequence requires 72-hour exposure minimum. I threw the radio across the cabin, watching it shatter against the wall. Immediately, the temperature in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. My breath clouded in front of my face as an overwhelming sense of being watched pressed in from all directions. Looking out across the forest canopy, I spotted movement around the second tower, people in what looked like hazmat suits moving equipment inside. When I raised my binoculars for a better look, all 5 figures stopped simultaneously and turned toward me, their faceplates reflecting sunlight like insect eyes. I ducked down, heart thundering against my ribs, certain they couldn't have seen me from that distance. When I dared look again seconds later, they were gone. My rational mind searched for explanations: scientific research team, Forest Service, environmental monitoring. But none explained the nocturnal visitations, the mysterious writing, the voices on a radio that shouldn't work this deep in the wilderness. I decided to leave, abandoning my original plan of staying a full week. Better to forfeit my deposit on the rental car than risk another night in this increasingly disturbing place. Packing quickly, I was halfway down the tower stairs when I noticed them. Dark figures standing in a perfect circle around the base, faces upturned toward me. Not moving, not calling out, just watching with expressionless faces. I counted 7 before vertigo forced me to grip the railing. When my vision cleared, the figures were gone, but the circle of flattened vegetation where they'd stood remained. I hesitated, scanning the forest edge for any sign of the watchers. Nothing moved except the wind through the trees. Decision time: make a break for my car or retreat to the relative safety of the cabin. The thought of spending another night there made my skin crawl, but attempting to navigate 3 miles of increasingly disorienting forest with potential pursuers seemed equally dangerous. My dilemma was solved when I spotted distant movement along the trail I'd need to take. More hazmat-suited figures carrying equipment too strange to identify. Back in the cabin, I barricaded the hatch with everything available: my cooler, backpack, the small table bolted to the floor that I managed to wrench free. Outside, the day progressed with unnatural speed, shadows lengthening too quickly as the sun raced toward the horizon. I checked my watch. Only 2:17 p.m., though the forest was already darkening as if evening approached. My watch had stopped, so had my phone. Time itself felt wrong, stretched and compressed simultaneously as I waited for whatever came with darkness. The most terrifying realization wasn't the figures circling below or the scratching that resumed as twilight deepened. It was understanding that the tower itself was part of whatever was happening. The metal vibrated constantly now, a low-frequency hum that resonated in my teeth and bones. The cabin's interior dimensions seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, corners extending impossibly when not directly observed. I needed to escape. The figures below had dispersed or hidden themselves, and the distant lights I'd seen the previous night hadn't yet appeared. Using my knife, I pried up a section of the cabin's floor, revealing the support structure beneath. If I could bypass the stairs entirely and climb down the interior support beams, I might avoid whatever waited on the standard path down. The space beneath the floor was tight, but navigable. I lowered myself with my backpack containing only essentials: water, first aid, flashlight, knife, and my camera with its documentation of everything. The tower's internal structure formed a lattice of metal supports that offered handholds for a controlled descent. The humming intensified inside the tower's skeleton, so loud now it disrupted my balance, making each movement dangerous. Halfway down, my flashlight illuminated something that nearly broke my resolve. The interior beams were covered with hundreds of small cloth bundles tied with red string. Each contained personal items: driver's licenses, watches, jewelry, photographs, mementos of others who had come before me. Some looked decades old, others disturbingly recent. Among them, I spotted a familiar cover, the same notebook I'd found near the second tower, but intact, unweathered, as if newly placed. I continued downward, trying to block out the implications of my discovery. 20 feet from the ground, disaster struck. A support beam gave way beneath my foot, sending me sliding downward in a shower of rust and debris. I managed to grab another beam, wrenching my shoulder painfully but stopping my fall. The noise echoed throughout the structure, impossibly loud. Any hope of a stealthy escape vanished with that cacophony. When I finally reached the ground, I didn't hesitate. Oriented by the North Star, I sprinted away from the tower toward where I believed the trail began. The forest had other ideas. Trees I didn't recognize blocked paths that should have been clear. Vegetation seemed to shift and reach as I passed. Twice I found myself running parallel to bizarre processions of lights moving through the trees. Not flashlights, but floating orbs that pulsed with sickly yellow luminescence. After what felt like hours of frantic navigation, I spotted something that filled me with both hope and dread. Headlights on a distant road. Not where my car should be, but civilization nonetheless. I altered course, pushing through increasingly dense undergrowth that tore at my clothing and skin. The branches seemed almost animated in their determination to hold me back, but desperation lent me strength I didn't know I possessed. I broke through the tree line onto an unfamiliar road, narrower than the one I'd driven in on, unmarked and poorly maintained. No vehicles in sight despite the headlights I'd seen moments before. My confusion deepened when I spotted a road sign half hidden by overgrowth. Observation zone perimeter. Authorized personnel only. Beyond it stood an abandoned checkpoint booth, windows shattered, interior gutted by time and elements. The distant sound of an engine spurred me back into motion. Headlights appeared around a bend. A large, dark vehicle moving slowly, sweeping the roadside with mounted spotlights. I ducked behind the checkpoint booth, peering through a broken window as the vehicle approached. It wasn't Forest Service or park rangers, but a black tactical-style truck with no markings. Through the windshield, I could make out figures in familiar hazmat suits. As the vehicle slowed near my hiding place, I noticed something horrifying. The suits weren't for protection. What I'd mistaken for faceplates were actually transparent compartments containing something that pulsed and shifted like the fungi I'd seen at the base of the second tower. The beings inside the suits moved with unsettling coordination, heads swiveling in perfect unison as they scanned the roadside. I pressed myself into the shadows, holding my breath as the spotlight passed inches from my position. The truck continued down the road, and I waited until its taillights disappeared before moving again. I had two choices: follow the road and risk encounter, or plunge back into the forest and try to find my original path. The forest, for all its strangeness, seemed the lesser evil. Before leaving my hiding place, I searched the abandoned checkpoint, finding a dusty map pinned to the wall that revealed something chilling. The entire area was marked as Aerobiological Research Range, with 17 towers positioned in a perfect geometric pattern. My tower was labeled 12, while the second tower I discovered was 17B. Back in the forest, I navigated by stars and instinct, moving as quietly as possible while fighting escalating panic. The sounds around me had changed, no longer natural forest ambience, but rhythmic pulses that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Each exhalation of the earth brought waves of that sweet metallic smell I'd noticed at the second tower, now so strong it left a film on my skin. Time lost all meaning as I pushed forward, driven by pure animal instinct to escape. Dawn revealed I'd been moving in an enormous circle. The first tower loomed ahead, exactly as I'd left it. Impossibly, despite hours of walking in what I believed was a straight line, I'd returned to where I started. Despair threatened to overwhelm me until I spotted something new. My car, parked at the base of the tower where no road existed. Too exhausted and desperate to question this impossible development, I staggered toward the vehicle. The keys were in the ignition. The engine started on the first try. As I accelerated away, I glanced in my rearview mirror and nearly drove off the suddenly appearing road. The tower was gone, replaced by an unblemished expanse of forest. Only my physical injuries and the camera in my backpack verified that anything had happened at all. I drove recklessly fast, not slowing until I reached the main highway. At the first gas station, I checked my phone. 5 days had passed, not the 2 nights I had experienced. I had dozens of missed calls from work and family. As I scrolled through notifications, an unmarked text appeared. Observation complete. Subject 12 released with monitoring protocol Delta. Biometric changes within expected parameters. The next week passed in a haze of nightmares and increasing paranoia. My doctor found nothing physically wrong besides the expected cuts and bruises, though she seemed concerned about my elevated white blood cell count. I developed an insatiable hunger that nothing seemed to satisfy and caught myself sleepwalking 3 times. Once awakening outside my apartment, staring up at the roof as if it were a tower. The photos in my camera revealed nothing, just empty forest landscapes where I distinctly remembered documenting symbols, figures, evidence. All except one. A selfie I didn't remember taking showed me inside the tower cabin, asleep in my sleeping bag, while something dark and fungal grew from my parted lips, spreading across my face in delicate, branching patterns. The timestamp showed 3:17 a.m. on my first night in the tower. Yesterday, I received a letter with no return address containing a Forest Service permit for a fire lookout tower in northern Michigan, along with a handwritten note. Tower 13 awaits your expertise. Previous observer failed to complete the transformation. The cycle continues. My hands haven't stopped shaking since opening it. I've locked all my doors and windows, but it doesn't matter. The hunger is getting worse. The dreams more vivid. In my bathroom mirror this morning, I noticed small black growths behind my ears, tiny, bulbous protrusions that pulse slightly with my heartbeat. I think I hear humming in the walls. I think I'm becoming something else. And worse still, I think I want to go back. My name is Vanessa Merrick, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Toronto where I work as an environmental journalist, constantly surrounded by concrete and noise. When my editor assigned me to write a piece on abandoned infrastructure in Ontario's wilderness, I jumped at the chance. The focus of my article, forgotten fire lookout towers that once formed a protective network across the province's vast forests. I convinced my girlfriend Imani to join me on what I promised would be an adventure weekend at one particular tower near Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park. We loaded up my Honda CR-V with camping gear, photography equipment, and enough supplies for 3 days. Imani wasn't entirely sold on the idea. She preferred hotels with proper bathrooms, but the prospect of supporting my career won her over. The drive north was pleasant, filled with roadside views of lakes that reflected the autumn colors like mirrors. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, however, the roads narrowed and deteriorated, eventually becoming little more than rutted dirt paths barely wide enough for my vehicle. The coordinates I'd obtained from a Forestry Service contact led us to a trailhead marked only by a faded wooden sign, so whether the text was illegible. A chain blocked vehicle access beyond this point, so we parked, shouldered our packs, and began the 2-mile hike to the tower. Imani kept up a steady stream of complaints about the mosquitoes while I concentrated on the GPS, making sure we didn't veer off course in the dense woodland. We nearly walked past the tower despite its height. Decades of forest growth had enclosed it in a natural fortress of pines and hemlocks. Unlike the romanticized images I'd collected for my research, this structure was a stark metal skeleton rising approximately 120 feet, topped with a small cabin that had once served as both workspace and living quarters for the rangers assigned here. The metal was corroded but remarkably intact, testament to the over-engineering common in mid-century infrastructure projects. "You can't seriously expect me to climb that tetanus trap," Imani said, looking up at the zigzagging staircase that clung to the tower's exterior. I assured her it was safer than it looked, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. Testing my weight on the first few steps, I was relieved to find the structure solid despite its appearance. Imani followed reluctantly, clutching the railing with white-knuckled intensity as we ascended. The cabin at the top was surprisingly spacious, maybe 15 feet square with windows on all sides offering unobstructed views of the surrounding wilderness. The floor was solid, the roof intact save for one corner where water damage had created a small hole. Someone had been here relatively recently. A rusted stove stood in one corner with the remnants of a campfire, and initials had been carved into the wooden walls alongside dates, the most recent from just last summer. We unpacked our gear, and I set about taking photographs for my article while Imani arranged our sleeping area. As sunset approached, the forest transformed into a sea of shadow and fire, the last rays of daylight catching the tops of trees and setting them ablaze with golden light. It was breathtaking, exactly the sort of imagery I needed for my piece. I was so engrossed in capturing the perfect shot that I almost missed Imani's concerned voice. "Van, what are these?" She was pointing to a series of marks on the floor, perfect circles burned into the wood in a pattern that seemed deliberate rather than random. I ran my fingers over the burns, feeling slight indentations. Probably just damage from hot embers, I suggested, though something about their precision bothered me. Imani shrugged, but continued glancing down at them as we prepared dinner on our portable stove. Night fell with startling swiftness, as if someone had thrown a dark blanket over the world. The first strange occurrence happened around midnight, a sudden blast of static from my battery-powered radio, which I hadn't even turned on. Both of us jolted awake from where we'd been dozing. The static continued for almost a minute before transforming into a series of rhythmic pulses that reminded me disturbingly of Morse code. Before I could reach it, the radio went silent again, its power light dark despite fresh batteries. Morning revealed a landscape transformed by mist so thick it seemed solid, obscuring everything beyond 50 feet from the tower. I brewed coffee while Imani slept, planning my day's research and photography schedule. The tower's logbook, a weathered volume I discovered wedged behind the stove, provided fascinating insights into the daily life of fire watchers who'd manned this post decades ago. Most entries were mundane weather observations and routine reports, but entries from the summer of 1976 stood out for their increasingly paranoid tone. Day 47. Smoke signals from the North Ridge again. Not forest fire. Too regular. Someone's trying to communicate. HQ denies any other personnel in the sector. And later, Day 53. The patterns in the mist aren't natural. They're forming symbols. I've started documenting them. HQ no longer responds to radio calls. The final entry, dated August 17th, 1976, simply read, "They're coming up the stairs tonight. I can hear them. If found, tell Marion I'm sorry." Imani woke to find me completely absorbed in the logbook. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pouring herself coffee from the pot. I shared the strange entries with her, expecting her to dismiss them as the ramblings of an isolated mind. Instead, she grew serious, revealing she'd had disturbing dreams all night. Visions of people climbing endless stairs while something formless pursued them through the mist. After breakfast, we decided to explore the immediate area around the tower's base. The descent felt more precarious in daylight, each step revealing just how far we could fall if the aged metal gave way. On solid ground, we discovered a small concrete building almost completely reclaimed by vegetation. Forcing the rusted door open revealed what appeared to be a generator room, though the equipment had long since been removed, leaving only mounting brackets and disconnected wiring. Written on the wall in faded red paint was a message: frequency 87.4, emergency use only. Below it, scratched more recently into the concrete, "Don't listen. They get in through the sound." Imani shivered despite the warm day, suggesting we return to the tower. I lingered, photographing everything, an uneasy feeling growing that there was more to these lookout towers than my research had uncovered. Our climb back up was interrupted by a distant sound, a mechanical whirring that seemed to be approaching through the forest. We froze on the stairs, listening as it grew louder then abruptly stopped. Minutes passed in tense silence before a voice called out from below, "Hello up there." Forestry Department. Relief washed over us as we continued climbing, assuming rangers were making routine checks on these abandoned structures. At the top, we found a middle-aged man in green uniform waiting inside our cabin. How he had reached the top before us defied logic, but he smiled warmly, introducing himself as Ranger Caleb Mitchell. He explained he was documenting these towers for potential historical preservation and seemed delighted to find fellow enthusiasts. Something felt off about his explanation, about the way his gaze lingered too long on the burned circles in the floor, but I dismissed my unease as paranoia fueled by the logbook's entries. Ranger Mitchell departed after about an hour, descending the stairs with a cheerful wave. We watched him disappear into the trees, heading west, though we'd heard his vehicle approach from the east. Imani voiced what I was thinking. How did he get up here before us if we were on the only staircase? We had no answer, but the incident cast a pall over the afternoon. I distracted myself with work, photographing the cabin's interior while Imani attempted to nap, complaining of a headache that had begun during the ranger's visit. As dusk approached, my radio spontaneously activated again, this time tuned precisely to 87.4 FM, the frequency mentioned in the generator room. Through bursts of static came fragments of what sounded like field reports, subject responses consistent with Phase 1 exposure. Maintain isolation protocols. Prepare for nocturnal observation cycle. I switched the radio off, but it immediately turned itself back on. When I removed the batteries, the broadcast continued uninterrupted, the voice now addressing us directly. Subjects in Tower 9 showing awareness. Initiate containment procedures. The moment the broadcast ended, Imani sat bolt upright from her fitful sleep, eyes wide but unfocused. "They're coming up the stairs," she whispered, her voice strange and flat. "Just like in the logbook. Just like in my dream." I rushed to the windows, seeing nothing but darkness in the rapidly falling night. Then, faintly, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps on metal, slow, deliberate, climbing toward us. The footsteps stopped just below the hatch that led into our cabin. We huddled together in the center of the room, away from windows and the entrance, my hand clasped over Imani's mouth to quiet her panicked breathing. Minutes stretched into an eternity of waiting. Nothing appeared, but the sensation of being watched intensified until it was almost a physical pressure against my skin. Around midnight, the radio crackled back to life, this time emitting a high-pitched tone that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Imani collapsed beside me, clutching her head in obvious pain. I lunged for the device, throwing it through the window in desperate panic. The glass shattered outward into the darkness, and the piercing noise cut off abruptly. In the sudden silence that followed, I heard something impossible, the sound of the radio hitting the ground directly beneath the window, despite the fact we were 120 feet above the forest floor. Imani recovered slowly, nosebleed dripping between her fingers as she sat up. "We need to leave at first light," she insisted, voice shaking. "Something's wrong with this place. The ranger, the radio, those burn marks, it's all connected." I didn't argue. My journalistic curiosity had been completely overridden by primal fear. We agreed to take shifts staying awake through the night, neither of us willing to be unconscious in this place any longer than necessary. During my watch, I noticed the burn marks on the floor had changed. The circles now formed a perfect map of the surrounding area with our tower at the center. Other points represented what could only be additional towers, forming a precise geometric pattern across the landscape. Most disturbing was a symbol burned beside our location that hadn't been there before, a crude representation of two human figures. As I stared, the wood grain within the circle seemed to shift and flow like liquid, though it remained solid when I touched it. Dawn brought no mist, revealing instead a drastically altered landscape. Where endless forest had surrounded us the previous day, now vast sections appeared to have been cleared in perfect geometric patterns that matched the map burned into our floor. In the distance, I counted 3 other towers that had definitely not been visible before, their metal frameworks glinting in the early light. Most disturbing was the realization that our vehicle, visible from this height, now appeared to be much farther away than the 2 miles we'd hiked. Eager to escape, we packed quickly, leaving behind anything non-essential to speed our departure. The stairs seemed to have elongated overnight, the descent taking nearly twice as long as our initial climb. About halfway down, Imani froze, pointing wordlessly to the forest edge. Ranger Mitchell stood watching us, utterly motionless. Beside him were 3 identical figures in forestry uniforms, each with the same build, same stance, same expressionless observation. We continued our descent, having no alternative. When we reached the bottom and turned toward the path that would lead us back to our car, all 4 ranger figures had vanished. In their place was a neatly folded uniform cap on a tree stump, exactly like the one Mitchell had worn. I approached cautiously and found a small device underneath it, something like a digital recorder, but with no visible buttons or display, just a speaker grill that emitted a faint, rhythmic pulse. The forest had transformed overnight into a labyrinth. Paths that should have led to our parking spot instead circled back to the tower or terminated in impassable thickets. Our GPS showed us moving steadily toward our destination while the tower remained visible behind us, an impossible contradiction. After 3 hours of increasingly desperate navigation, we stumbled upon a small concrete bunker half buried in the hillside, identical to the generator room but intact, its interior illuminated by functioning fluorescent lights. Inside, what we found shattered any remaining doubt that we were experiencing something beyond normal explanation. The walls were covered with photographs and documents, surveillance images of the tower taken over decades, including several showing us from the previous day. A map identical to the burned pattern on our cabin floor hung on the far wall, with 17 towers marked across the region. Notes attached to each location contained clinical observations. Tower 3. Subject exhibited extreme aggression before neural collapse. Unsuitable. Tower 7. Subject achieved partial synchronization but rejected secondary phase. Terminated protocol. Most chilling was the file open on the desk labeled Tower 9 Current Subjects, containing detailed biographical information about both Imani and me. Our addresses, medical histories, psychological profiles, even frequency analyses of our voices. The final page bore yesterday's date and a single notation. Auditory integration successful. Proceed with physical phase at 3:17. I checked my watch. It was already past noon. We had less than 15 hours before whatever they had planned would begin. As we absorbed this terrifying discovery, a mechanical hum filled the bunker. Metal shutters slammed down over the entrance we'd used to enter. Red emergency lights replaced the fluorescents, and a calm, automated voice announced, "Containment protocol activated. Please remain calm. Frequency enhancement will commence in 60 seconds. Earplugs have been provided for your comfort." On the desk, a small box had appeared containing what looked like standard foam earplugs. Imani and I exchanged glances, both understanding instinctively that whatever these earplugs might do, protection wasn't their purpose. The mechanical countdown continued as we frantically searched for another exit. Behind a filing cabinet, we discovered a maintenance hatch leading to a narrow utility tunnel. Without hesitation, we squeezed through just as the frequency enhancement began, a sound so profoundly wrong it seemed to exist inside my skull rather than in the air around us. The tunnel was barely wider than my shoulders, forcing us to crawl on hands and knees through darkness broken only by distant emergency lighting. After what felt like hours of claustrophobic progress, the tunnel opened into a larger underground corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Directional markers on the wall indicated we were heading away from Tower 9, our tower, and towards something labeled Central Processing. With no better option, we followed the corridor, alert to any sound that might indicate pursuit. The facility appeared automated. We encountered no personnel, just increasingly sophisticated equipment as we progressed deeper. Eventually, we reached a security door with a keycard reader. Beside it, a window overlooked an enormous chamber filled with what appeared to be medical pods, dozens of them arranged in concentric circles around a central pillar of humming machinery. Most pods were empty, but several contained human forms connected to an array of tubes and monitoring equipment. From our vantage point, we could see their faces, all identical to Ranger Mitchell. The security door unexpectedly slid open, revealing an empty control room. Monitor displays showed feeds from cameras positioned throughout the forest and inside what must have been the other towers. On one screen, I recognized the interior of our cabin, now occupied by two figures in hazmat-style gear meticulously examining the floor where the burned patterns had appeared. Another screen showed our vehicle, now surrounded by similar personnel setting up equipment around its perimeter. Imani discovered a terminal labeled Subject Tracking and quickly navigated through its interface. What she found confirmed our worst fears. We weren't the first visitors to Tower 9. The system contained records of dozens of subjects dating back to 1973, each exposed to auditory integration followed by physical synchronization. Success rates were clinically documented, along with disposal procedures for non-viable candidates. Most disturbing was the purpose: creation of suitable vessels for distributed consciousness nodes. While Imani continued searching for escape routes on the facility maps, I accessed another terminal showing the broader operation. The 17 towers formed an interconnected network, each serving as a collection point for specific frequency patterns that, according to the documentation, could restructure neural pathways to accommodate non-human thought structures. The ultimate goal appeared to be creating human hosts capable of interfacing with something referred to only as the signal. An alert suddenly flashed across all screens. Subjects located, Control Room B. Alarms blared as security protocols activated. We abandoned our research and fled through the only other door, finding ourselves in what appeared to be a garage housing several vehicles, including unmarked vans and forestry service trucks. Keys hung on a board nearby. Our ticket out if we could make it past whatever security measures protected this facility. We selected the least conspicuous vehicle, a standard forestry service pickup, and I hot-wired it using skills I'd rather not explain to my editor. The garage door responded automatically as we approached, revealing a tunnel that sloped upward toward daylight. Behind us, figures in hazmat suits poured into the garage, some carrying what looked like specialized sound equipment rather than conventional weapons. Their pursuit confirmed our suspicion. They wanted us alive, not dead. Whatever physical synchronization entailed, it required living subjects. The tunnel emerged onto a service road that didn't appear on any of our maps. I accelerated hard, tires throwing gravel as we fled. In the rearview mirror, I saw the hazmat team watching our departure without apparent concern. Their confidence was more terrifying than pursuit would have been, as if our escape had been anticipated, even planned for. The road wound through forest sections that seemed artificially uniform, trees planted in precise formations rather than natural growth patterns. After several miles, we encountered a checkpoint, a simple gate with a guard booth that appeared unmanned. I prepared to crash through, but as we approached, the gate lifted automatically. Beyond it, the road connected to a public highway I recognized from our drive-in. Too easy. Everything about our escape felt choreographed, predetermined. When we passed beneath the gate, both our phones simultaneously activated with incoming text messages despite having had no service for days. The same message appeared on both screens. Integration Phase 1 complete. Proceed home for monitoring. Extraction teams will contact within 72 hours. Ignoring the disturbing message, we drove relentlessly toward Toronto, stopping only for gas and avoiding all human contact. Neither of us spoke much, both processing the impossible situation and dreading what might await us at home. As city lights finally appeared on the horizon, Imani broke the silence. They're in our heads now, aren't they? Whatever that sound did. I had no comforting response, only the cold certainty that our escape had never been an escape at all. 3 days passed in paranoid isolation at my apartment. We disabled our phones, covered every screen and speaker, even stuffed towels under the doors, anything to block potential signals. Sleep came in brief, restless intervals, interrupted by identical nightmares of climbing endless stairs while our bodies transformed with each step, becoming something neither human nor wholly other. When awake, we experienced moments of lost time. Minutes or hours where we'd find ourselves staring blankly at walls or standing in rooms with no memory of entering them. On the third night, I woke to find Imani standing perfectly still by the window, her silhouette wrong somehow, too angular, her neck bent at an impossible angle as she looked up at the night sky. When I called her name, she turned with mechanical precision, her movements jerky as if her body were being operated by someone unfamiliar with human locomotion. "They're here," she said, her voice layered with a subtle harmonic that made my teeth vibrate. "The extraction team is coming up the stairs." We were 12 stories up in a secure building. There were no stairs directly to my apartment, only an elevator and internal hallways. Yet I heard it too, the rhythmic metallic clang of footsteps ascending, exactly as we'd heard at the tower. Imani's eyes had changed, the pupils elongated vertically like a cat's, or, more disturbingly, like the stylized eye symbols burned into our cabin floor. I backed away as she advanced, her movements becoming smoother, more confident with each step. "The process is nearly complete," she said in that resonant voice. "Your resistance creates unnecessary suffering. The integration is already within you, restructuring as we speak. Can't you feel it?" And I could, a pressure behind my eyes, thoughts that didn't feel like my own surfacing and submerging in my consciousness. Ideas and concepts I couldn't possibly understand nonetheless felt familiar, as if I'd always known them but had been unable to access them until now. The footsteps outside grew louder. Through the peephole, I saw not my apartment hallway but the metal staircase of Tower 9, ascending into darkness. Reality itself was breaking down around us. When I turned back, Imani stood directly behind me, her face inches from mine, those vertical pupils dilating as she studied me with clinical detachment. Your neural architecture shows remarkable compatibility. You'll make an excellent node in the network. So many others have failed. I shoved past her and ran for the emergency exit, irrationally believing I could escape whatever was happening. The door opened not to the expected stairwell, but directly into the tower cabin where our nightmare had begun. Sunlight streamed through the windows, though it had been night seconds before. At the center of the room stood 4 figures wearing Ranger Mitchell's face, arranged in a perfect square around a device emitting the same high-pitched frequency that had incapacitated us days earlier. My body moved without my conscious direction, walking calmly to join Imani, who now stood among them. My mind screamed in protest while my limbs obeyed external commands. One of the Mitchell duplicates spoke, its mouth moving independently of the words I heard. Subject integration 87% complete. Preparing for final synchronization and consciousness transfer. Tower 9 has yielded optimal results. The network will be strengthened. Through the windows, I saw the other towers visible across the landscape, each sending a beam of light upward into the clouds. Not physical light, but something that registered in my altered perception as information, consciousness, signal. My tower, our tower, was the only dark one. It awaited our contribution, our final surrender to whatever intelligence had engineered this elaborate trap for unwary humans seeking wilderness solitude. With my last fragments of independent thought, I fought against the programming. My hands, trembling with effort, reached for the device at the center of our circle. The Mitchell duplicates moved to stop me, but their coordination faltered as I disrupted the frequency. Imani's eyes cleared momentarily, recognition and horror dawning as she too briefly regained control. Together, we toppled the device, sending it crashing through the floorboards where it exploded in a shower of components and unearthly light. Reality fractured around us. The tower, the duplicates, the facility, all shifted and overlapped like multiple exposure photographs. I found myself simultaneously in my apartment, the tower, the underground facility, and somewhere else entirely. A vast, geometrically impossible space where consciousness existed without physical form. In this realm, I perceived the true nature of what had been happening. The towers formed a technological doorway, allowing something ancient and utterly alien to access our dimension through human nervous systems reconfigured to serve as living conduits. I awoke in a hospital bed 3 weeks later with no memory of how I'd gotten there. According to the staff, Imani and I had been found unconscious in my apartment after neighbors reported screaming. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater was the official diagnosis, explaining our shared hallucinations and paranoia. Imani recovered more quickly than I did, discharged after just 2 days. She left no messages, no contact information. According to the nurse, she'd simply walked out without speaking to anyone. My editor was understanding about the missed deadline, suggesting I focus on recovery rather than the abandoned tower article. When I checked my research files, I found all my notes and photographs corrupted beyond recovery, all except one image showing Imani standing at the tower window, her silhouette strange and elongated, looking up at something beyond the frame. Most disturbing was what I hadn't noticed when taking the picture. Her shadow on the cabin floor didn't match her human form, but instead formed one of the precise circular patterns we'd found burned into the wood. Yesterday, a package arrived at my apartment. A Forestry Service uniform cap identical to Ranger Mitchell's with a note inside reading, "Tower 14 requires a new observer. Your previous performance exceeded expectations." Beneath the cap was a map showing a location in northern Ontario and a key labeled only with the number 14. Most terrifying was the signature, my own name, in my handwriting, but dated 3 weeks into the future. I've packed a bag, not to flee, but to go to Tower 14. Some compulsion beyond my control pulls me north, an integration I can't reverse no matter how I fight it. In my darkest moments of clarity, I understand what's happening. The towers aren't just observation posts. They're transformation sites, converting humans into something capable of processing alien frequencies. And whatever began in Tower 9 is spreading, using duplicates of integrated subjects to create more nodes in an expanding network. I wonder which version of me signed that note, and which version is writing these words now. I'm Elias Whitaker, 32 years old, and I hail from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Last summer, I decided to shake things up and go camping in Ontario's Algonquin Provincial Park, chasing the thrill of sleeping in an abandoned fire lookout tower. I'd heard about these crumbling relics, tall, skeletal structures perched on lonely hills, once used to spot wildfires. Sounded like a creepy but cool adventure. I packed my old Jeep with gear, a cooler of food, and enough coffee to keep me wired for days. My buddy Nolan, a lanky 29-year-old from Toronto with a knack for bad puns, tagged along. So did Priya, his sharp-witted girlfriend, who's 28 and a nurse with a no-nonsense vibe. We met up in Huntsville, Ontario, and headed into the park, the Jeep rattling over dirt roads as the pines closed in around us. The drive into Algonquin was quiet, just the hum of tires and Nolan's playlist of 90s grunge. I kept glancing at the map, nervous about finding the trail to the lookout tower. It wasn't on any official park guide, more of a whispered tip from a Reddit thread about haunted Ontario hikes. Priya teased me for overthinking it, saying I'd probably get us lost before we even saw the tower. She wasn't wrong. My sense of direction's about as reliable as a dollar store compass. The air felt heavier as we got deeper into the park, like the forest was holding its breath. By late afternoon, we parked at a trailhead near Booth's Rock Trail, grabbed our packs, and started hiking toward the coordinates I'd scribbled down. The trail was overgrown, all tangled roots and mossy rocks. My boots sank into the damp earth, and I could smell the sharp tang of pine and decay. Nolan kept joking about bears, but Priya shut him up, saying we'd be lucky to see a squirrel. After about an hour, we spotted it. The lookout tower, a rusted metal skeleton jutting up from a rocky outcrop. It looked like something out of a horror movie, all jagged angles and peeling paint. My stomach did a little flip, not sure if it was excitement or nerves. We climbed the creaky stairs, each step groaning like it might collapse. The view from the top was unreal, a sea of green stretching to the horizon, with the sun dipping low, painting everything gold. Inside the tower's observation room, it was a mess, broken glass, graffiti, and a musty smell that clung to everything. I dropped my pack, feeling a mix of awe and unease. This place was creepy as hell, but that's what I'd signed up for, right? Nolan was already snapping photos, acting like we'd stumbled into some urban explorer's paradise. Priya, though, seemed off, staring out the cracked windows like she'd seen something move in the trees below. I brushed it off. The forest plays tricks on you. We set up our sleeping bags, cracked open some beers, and started a small propane stove to heat up chili. The normalcy of it, eating, laughing, felt good, like we were just three friends chilling. But there was this nagging feeling, like we weren't as alone as we thought. The tower's walls were thin, and every gust of wind made them shudder. I kept catching myself glancing at the windows, expecting to see, I don't know, something. Nolan told a dumb story about a ghost ranger who supposedly haunted these towers, which got a laugh out of me, but made Priya go quiet again. She's not the type to scare easy, so that stuck with me. As night fell, the temperature dropped, and the forest went dead silent. No crickets, no owls, just this heavy, suffocating quiet. I zipped up my jacket, trying to shake the chill that wasn't just from the cold. We played cards to pass the time, but the vibe was off. Nolan kept fumbling his deals, like he was distracted, and Priya barely spoke, her eyes darting to the windows every few minutes. I tried to keep things light, joking about how we'd tell everyone we survived a haunted tower. But the truth? I was starting to feel it too, that prickly, horror movie sense that something was watching us. The tower felt too exposed, like a fishbowl on stilts. I told myself it was just the isolation messing with my head. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere, right? What could possibly go wrong? The wind picked up, rattling the tower's loose panels. It sounded like someone tapping on the walls, irregular and insistent. I laughed it off, saying it was just the ghost ranger Nolan made up, but my heart was pounding. Priya finally spoke up, her voice low, saying she swore she saw a light flicker in the trees earlier. Not a campfire, but something quick, like a flashlight switching on and off. Nolan shrugged it off, but I could tell he was spooked too. We decided to turn in, figuring sleep would reset our nerves. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling, the rusted beams barely visible in the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd made a mistake coming here. The tower was supposed to be this cool, off-the-grid adventure, but it felt more like we trespassed into something we didn't understand. I kept thinking about that Reddit thread, how one commenter warned, "Some places don't want you there." At the time, I thought it was just dramatic nonsense. Now, lying in the dark, I wasn't so sure. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me. I told myself to chill out, that it was just a creepy old tower. But as I drifted towards sleep, I swore I heard something. A faint scrape, like metal on metal, coming from below the tower. By midnight, the cold was brutal, seeping through my sleeping bag. I kept my flashlight close, its weak beam barely cutting through the dark. Nolan was snoring, but Priya was wide awake, sitting up and staring out the window. I whispered, asking if she was okay, but she just shook her head, her face pale in the moonlight. Something about her expression sent a shiver through me, like she'd seen something I hadn't. I wanted to ask more, but my eyes were heavy, and the exhaustion was winning. As I closed them, I told myself tomorrow would be better, just a hike back to the Jeep, back to civilization. But deep down, I knew something was off. Something disturbing was waiting out there in the dark. I woke up to Priya shaking my shoulder, her voice a harsh whisper. "Elias, get up. Something's wrong." The tower was pitch black, the kind of dark that swallows your flashlight beam. My watch said 3 a.m., and the air was so cold my breath fogged. Nolan was still out cold, snoring like a chainsaw. I fumbled for my flashlight, its light catching Priya's wide eyes. She pointed to the window, saying she'd seen that flicker again. Same quick flash in the trees, closer this time. My stomach twisted. I told her it was probably just a camper or a ranger, but the words felt hollow. Who'd be out here in the middle of the night? The tower creaked around us, and I couldn't shake the horror of feeling like we were being watched. I crawled out of my sleeping bag, my joints stiff from the cold metal floor. The tower felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. I shone my flashlight out the window, but all I saw were endless trees, their branches clawing at the sky. Priya swore she wasn't imagining things, and I believed her. She's not the type to cry wolf. I tried waking Nolan, but he just mumbled something about 5 more minutes and rolled over. Typical. I was torn between climbing down to check it out and staying put. Going down those rickety stairs in the dark felt like a terrible idea, but so did sitting here, waiting for whatever was out there to come to us. My gut screamed to stay put, but curiosity's a cruel thing. We decided to wait it out until dawn, figuring daylight would make everything less scary. I kept my flashlight on, sweeping it across the room like I was in some low-budget horror flick. Priya sat close, clutching her pocket knife, which I didn't even know she had. She said she always carried it hiking. Smart move, I guess, but it made me realize how unprepared I was. My big plan was this cool camping trip, but I hadn't even brought a proper map, just those sketchy Reddit coordinates. Stupid mistake. The silence outside was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of the tower or a distant snap in the woods. Each sound made my heart lurch, like we were one step away from something awful. Around 4 a.m., Nolan finally stirred, groaning about the cold. I filled him in, keeping my voice low. He laughed it off, saying we were freaking out over nothing, but his eyes kept darting to the windows. We started arguing about what to do, stay in the tower or pack up and hike back to the Jeep before sunrise. Nolan wanted to leave, saying he didn't sign up for paranoid ghost stories. Priya snapped back, saying running blind in the dark was dumber than staying. I sided with her, but honestly, I was second-guessing everything. The tower was supposed to be our shelter, but it felt more like a trap, exposed and creaking in the wind. Then we heard it, a low, deliberate scrape, like something heavy dragging across the ground below. Not the wind, not an animal. My mouth went dry. I flicked off my flashlight, like that'd somehow make us invisible. Priya grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Nolan whispered, "What the hell was that?" Like I had answers. We crouched low, peering through the grimy windows. Nothing but darkness and the faint outline of trees. I kept thinking about those horror stories where people ignore the signs and end up dead. Like that couple in Blair Witch, lost and bickering until it was too late. I wasn't about to let that be us, but I had no clue what to do next. We stayed frozen, listening so hard my ears ached. The scraping stopped, but now there was this faint hum, like a machine idling far off. It wasn't natural, not out here. Priya whispered that it sounded like a generator, but who'd be running one in the middle of Algonquin? My mind raced. Maybe poachers, or some creepy off-grid hermit. I'd read about people living in these woods, dodging rangers, setting up camps no one ever finds. The thought made my skin crawl. Nolan suggested it was just park maintenance, but at 4 a.m.? No way. The hum kept going, steady and disturbing, like it was daring us to investigate. I started digging through my pack, looking for anything useful, a knife, a flare, anything. All I had was a multi-tool and some rope, which felt pathetic. Priya was pacing now, muttering about how we should have stayed in a campground like normal people. I couldn't argue. This was my dumb idea, and now we were stuck in a rusty tower with something weird circling below. Nolan kept trying to lighten the mood, cracking jokes about Bigfoot's lawnmower, but his voice shook. We were all on edge, each of us making little mistakes, knocking over a water bottle, tripping over a sleeping bag, our nerves fraying like old rope. The hum stopped abruptly, and the silence was worse. It was like the forest was holding its breath again, waiting for us to make a move. I kept thinking about that Reddit warning. Some places don't want you there. Why didn't I listen? I whispered to Priya and Nolan that we should stick together, no matter what. Splitting up is how horror movies end badly, right? Like every dumb slasher flick where the group scatters and gets picked off. We agreed to stay put until dawn, but every creak of the tower made me jump. I kept my flashlight off now, scared it'd draw attention. The dark felt alive, pressing in from all sides. By 5 a.m., the sky was starting to lighten, just a faint gray creeping over the horizon. We were exhausted, but none of us could sleep. Priya kept her knife out, Nolan was gripping a flashlight like a club, and I was trying to act calm, like I had it together. Truth is, I was terrified. Something was out there, and it wasn't just our imaginations. The tower felt like a cage, and we were sitting ducks. I kept glancing at the stairs, wondering if we could make a run for the jeep if things got worse. But the trail was a good hour's hike, and whatever was out there felt closer than that. Way too close. The first rays of dawn barely cut through the fog, but it was enough to make the forest look like a ghost town of trees. I was crouched by the window, my breath fogging the cracked glass, when I saw it, a figure moving below, just at the edge of the clearing. Not a deer, not a bear. It was tall, too tall, and it moved wrong, like it was gliding instead of walking. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hissed at Priya and Nolan to look, but by the time they scrambled over, it was gone. Priya's face was ashen, and even Nolan, who'd been playing tough, looked like he'd seen a ghost. The horror of it hit me hard. This wasn't some camper or ranger. Something was seriously, disturbingly wrong out there. I grabbed my multi-tool, feeling like an idiot for thinking it could do anything. Priya clutched her knife, her knuckles white, and Nolan was muttering curses under his breath, his flashlight shaking in his hand. We stayed low, barely breathing, watching the trees. Then we heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a moan but not human. It came from below the tower, close enough to make my skin crawl. I thought of those old stories about wendigos, spirits that haunt the northern woods, but I shoved it down. That's just folklore, right? Except the air felt heavy, like it was charged with something evil. I kept picturing that figure, its unnatural glide, and my stomach churned. We whispered about what to do, our voices barely audible. Nolan wanted to bolt for the jeep, saying we could outrun whatever it was. Priya snapped that running blind was suicide. Those trails were a maze, and we'd be easy prey in the open. I agreed, but staying felt just as bad. The tower was a death trap, all rusted metal and no real defense. My big mistake was thinking this place was just creepy cool. Now it felt like we'd walked into a horror movie, and we were the idiots who didn't turn back. That moan came again, closer, and I swear it sounded like it was circling the tower's base. I peeked through a gap in the floorboards, trying to see what was down there. The light was too dim, but I caught a glint, something metallic, maybe a tool or a weapon, lying in the dirt below. My mind raced. Had someone been here before us? I thought of those missing hiker stories you hear about in Algonquin, people vanishing without a trace. Like that guy in 2019 who went off trail and was never found, just his backpack left behind. I shook it off, but the thought stuck. Nolan was pacing now, saying we should have brought a gun. Priya rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. She was too busy watching the stairs, like something might climb up any second. Then the tower shook. Not a wind gust, but a hard, deliberate jolt, like something slammed into the supports. We froze, my heart pounding so loud I thought it'd give us away. The moan turned into a screech, sharp and unnatural, like nails on a chalkboard mixed with a dying animal. It was right below us now. I grabbed Priya's arm, pulling her back from the window. Nolan dropped his flashlight, and it rolled across the floor, the beam spinning wildly. "What the hell is that thing?" he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't have an answer, but the terror was real, clawing at my chest like a living thing. We scrambled to barricade the trapdoor to the stairs, piling our packs and the propane stove against it. It was a pathetic defense, but it was all we had. The tower shook again, harder, and I heard a metallic clang, like something was climbing the stairs. My mind flashed to every horror story I'd ever heard. Things that stalk the woods, things that aren't human but hunt like they are. Priya was whispering to herself, some kind of prayer, her hands shaking. I wanted to tell her it'd be okay, but the lie stuck in my throat. Whatever was out there wasn't just passing through, it wanted us. The screeching stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that was somehow worse. I kept waiting for another jolt, another sound, but nothing came. It was like whatever it was knew we were trapped and was toying with us. I thought about my Jeep, parked a mile away, and how we'd never make it there without running into whatever this was. Nolan suggested signaling for help, but our phones had no service out here. Classic horror movie problem. I cursed myself for not bringing a satellite phone or even a damn whistle. All my prep, all my gear, and I'd still screwed us over. I risked another glance through the floorboard gap, my flashlight off to avoid drawing attention. In the faint dawn light, I saw it again. That figure, standing just beyond the trees. It was tall, thin, with limbs that looked too long, like they didn't bend right. It didn't move, just stood there, staring up at the tower. My blood ran cold. It wasn't human, not even close. I backed away, my hands trembling, and whispered to Priya and Nolan what I'd seen. Priya's face went blank, like she was shutting down, and Nolan looked like he might puke. The air felt electric, like a storm was about to break. We huddled in the center of the room, away from the windows, our breath shallow. The trapdoor rattled, just once, like something tested it. I gripped my multi-tool so hard my hand ached, knowing it was useless against whatever was down there. The terror was suffocating now, every creak of the tower amplifying it. I kept thinking about how we'd laughed off the Reddit warnings, how I'd dragged us here for some stupid adventure. Now we were stuck, with something unnatural circling below, and no way out. The worst part? I had a sinking feeling it wasn't just one thing out there. It felt like we were surrounded. The trapdoor rattled again, harder, and I swear my heart stopped. That thing, whatever it was coming for us, and we couldn't just sit here like bait in a can. I grabbed Priya and Nolan, whispering we had to move now. The Jeep was our only shot, a mile away through the dense Algonquin woods. Priya nodded, her face set like she was ready to fight, but Nolan was shaking, muttering about how we were screwed. I shoved our packs aside, yanking open the trapdoor. The stairs creaked below, and that screech ripped through the air again, so close it felt like it was in my skull. The horror of it pushed me forward, staying meant death. We had to run, even if it felt like sprinting into a nightmare. I went first, my boots slipping on the rusted stairs. Each step groaned, loud enough to wake the dead, and I kept expecting those long, wrong limbs to grab me from below. Priya followed, her knife out, and Nolan stumbled behind, clutching his flashlight like it was a lifeline. The air was thick with fog, the trees barely visible in the dawn light. That unnatural hum started again, louder, like it was coming from all sides. My mind flashed to those horror movies where the monster's always one step ahead, like Predator, but this felt worse, more real, more cruel. We hit the ground running, branches clawing at my face as we bolted toward the trail. The forest felt alive, and not in a good way. Every snap of a twig, every rustle, made me flinch. I kept glancing back, half expecting to see that tall, twisted figure gliding after us. Priya was faster than I expected, her nurse's calm kicking in, but Nolan was lagging, tripping over roots. "Come on, man," I hissed, grabbing his arm. He was panting, eyes wild, saying he saw something move to our left. I didn't look, I couldn't. The Jeep was our goal, and I clung to that like a prayer. But the trail was a mess, overgrown and disorienting, like the woods were shifting to trap us. That screech came again, closer, and something crashed through the trees behind us. My chest burned, legs screaming, but I pushed harder. Priya shouted to stick together, but Nolan was falling behind, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I yelled for him to keep up, but he tripped, sprawling into the dirt. I skidded to a stop, heart pounding, and ran back to haul him up. His face was pale, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "It's right there," he gasped, pointing into the fog. I saw it too, a shadow, too tall, moving fast. The terror was choking me, but I dragged Nolan forward, praying we weren't already dead. We kept running, the trail twisting like it was mocking us. The hum was deafening now, vibrating in my bones. I remembered stories about Algonquin, how hikers found weird carvings or abandoned camps, signs of something older than the park itself. I thought it was just creepy folklore, but now I wasn't sure. Priya screamed, pointing at the ground, fresh scratches in the dirt, like something sharp had been dragged across it. Not animal tracks, but deliberate, like a message. My stomach dropped. We were being hunted, and whatever it was knew these woods better than we did. The jeep was close. I could see the clearing through the trees. Hope flared, but then Nolan screamed, a raw, panicked sound. I spun around, and he was gone, just gone. Priya grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with horror. "Where is he?" she yelled, but the forest swallowed her voice. I shouted his name, my voice cracking, but there was no answer, just that damn hum, louder than ever. I wanted to go back, but Priya pulled me toward the jeep, saying we couldn't help him if we died. My heart tore in half. Nolan was my friend, but she was right. We sprinted, the screeching right behind us now. The jeep loomed ahead, a rusted beacon in the fog. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking so bad I dropped them. Priya cursed, scanning the trees, her knife useless against whatever was out there. I grabbed the keys, unlocked the doors, and we dove inside. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the gas, tires spinning on the dirt. The hum was everywhere, like it was inside the car. I glanced in the rearview mirror and nearly screamed. Something was moving in the trees, keeping pace with us. It was tall, its limbs jerking unnaturally, like a marionette with cut strings. I floored it, the jeep bouncing over ruts. We hit the main road, my hands white-knuckling the wheel. Priya was crying, muttering about Nolan, about how we left him. Guilt hit me like a truck. I dragged us here, picked this stupid tower, ignored every warning. The screeching faded as we sped away, but the hum lingered, low and menacing. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting that thing to be right behind us. The road was empty, but it didn't feel like we'd escaped. My mind kept replaying Nolan's scream, the way he'd just vanished. I wanted to believe he was okay, but deep down, I knew better. Priya and I didn't talk, just stared ahead as the forest blurred past. The jeep's engine was the only sound, but I could still feel that hum in my chest, like it was burned into me. We were alive, but at what cost? Nolan was gone, and I had no idea if we were safe or if that thing was still out there, waiting. The park's exit was miles away, and every shadow in the trees felt like a threat. I kept driving, praying we'd make it out, but the horror of what we'd seen clung to us, heavy and suffocating, like a stain we couldn't wash off. The jeep's tires hummed on the gravel road, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Priya sat rigid, staring out the window, her knife still clutched tight. We were out of the woods, literally, but the horror of what happened clung to us like damp rot. I kept seeing Nolan's face, his panic as he fell, and that thing in the trees. I wanted to turn back, to find him, but Priya's voice was sharp, saying we'd die if we did. The park's exit was close, maybe 10 minutes, and I told myself we'd call the rangers, get help. But deep down, I knew Nolan was gone. The guilt was crushing, a cruel weight for picking this damn tower in the first place. We passed a sign for the park gate, and I let myself hope we'd made it. Then the engine sputtered. My heart sank as the jeep lurched, dashboard lights flickering. No, 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 I muttered, slamming the steering wheel. Priya snapped out of her daze, asking what was wrong, but I didn't have answers. The jeep rolled to a stop, smoke curling from under the hood. I cursed my luck. Why hadn't I checked the damn thing before we left Winnipeg? We were stranded, miles from help, with that disturbing hum starting up again, faint but growing. It was like the forest itself was mocking us. I popped the hood, but I'm no mechanic. The engine looked like a mess of wires and grease, and the smell of burnt oil hit me hard. Priya climbed out, scanning the trees, her knife glinting in the morning light. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice tight. I nodded, but where could we go? The park gate was too far to walk, and the woods felt alive with that thing. I thought of those horror stories where the car always breaks down at the worst moment, like in Jeepers Creepers. This wasn't a movie, though, and the terror was real, clawing at my insides as the hum got louder. We grabbed what we could, water, a flashlight, Priya's knife, and started walking. The road was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, just that hum pulsing like a heartbeat. My mind kept replaying our mistakes, trusting those Reddit coordinates, ignoring Priya's bad vibes, leaving no one behind. Each step felt like a countdown. Then Priya froze, pointing at the road ahead. Scratches, like the ones we'd seen before, crisscrossed the gravel, deep and deliberate. My stomach twisted. It was here, whatever it was, and it was playing with us, like a cat with a half-dead mouse. The hum turned into that screech again, so loud it hurt. I grabbed Priya's hand, pulling her off the road into the trees, hoping to hide. Bad move. The forest closed in, branches snapping underfoot as we ran. I kept thinking of Nolan, how he'd vanished in a heartbeat. Priya was gasping, her face pale, but she kept up. We ducked behind a massive pine, hearts pounding, as the screeching stopped. Silence again, but it was worse, like the calm before a storm. I whispered we should keep moving, but Priya shook her head, tears in her eyes. "It's not letting us go," she said. Then I saw it, through the trees, that tall, twisted figure, closer than ever. Its limbs jerked, head tilted at a sickening angle, like it was studying us. My blood ran cold. I pushed Priya forward, yelling to run, but she tripped, her knife skittering into the underbrush. I hauled her up, but the thing was moving now, gliding toward us with that horrible, fluid motion. My mind screamed to fight, but what could we do? It was like facing a nightmare made real, something that didn't belong in this world. We stumbled toward the road, my legs burning, the screeching right behind us. We broke through the trees, the park gate visible in the distance. Hope surged, but it was short-lived. The figure was there, standing in the middle of the road, blocking our path. Its face, if you could call it that, was a blur, like static on an old TV. Priya screamed, and I froze, my mind blank with terror. I thought of every dumb choice that led us here, my obsession with this adventure, dragging my friends into this horror. I grabbed a rock, ready to throw it, but the thing didn't move. It just stood there, humming, like it was waiting for us to make the next mistake. Priya pulled me back, whispering we could circle around through the woods. I nodded, too scared to argue, but as we turned, the ground gave way. A hidden ditch, covered in leaves, swallowed us. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my ankle. Priya landed beside me, groaning, her arm bent wrong. The screeching was above us now, circling. I tried to stand, but my ankle buckled, and Priya was struggling, blood seeping through her sleeve. The thing was at the edge of the ditch, its long limbs reaching down, and I knew we'd made our last mistake. The hum filled my head, drowning out everything. I looked at Priya, her eyes wide with fear, and I wanted to say I was sorry, for Nolan, for this trip, for everything. But the words wouldn't come. The figure loomed closer, its presence suffocating, like it was feeding off our terror. My vision blurred, the world tilting as the screeching became a roar. I don't know if it was seconds or minutes, but the last thing I felt was Priya's hand slipping from mine, the cold ground beneath me, and the crushing weight of a tragedy I'd brought on us all. I'm Tessa Marwood, 27 years old, and I live in Regina, Saskatchewan. Last fall, I got this wild idea to camp in an abandoned fire lookout tower in Ontario's Lake of the Woods Provincial Park. I'd read about these old towers online, relics from when rangers scanned for wildfires, now left to rot in the wilderness. Sounded like a spooky adventure, perfect for shaking off my desk job boredom. I loaded my beat-up Subaru with camping gear, a sketchbook for doodling, and way too many snacks. My cousin Leo, a 30-year-old mechanic from Kenora with a loud laugh, came along, bringing his friend Mara, a 25-year-old photographer who's all about capturing vibes. We met up in Kenora, then drove deep into the park, the road narrowing as the forest swallowed us whole. The drive was bumpy, my Subaru rattling like it might fall apart. Leo kept messing with the radio, landing on some staticky country station, while Mara snapped photos of the endless pines through the window. I was pumped but nervous. My only camping experience was backyard sleepovers as a kid. The tower's location wasn't on any map, just a tip from a sketchy hiking forum I probably shouldn't have trusted. Mara teased me for being such a city girl, but Leo was all in, saying he'd always wanted to explore something creepy. By late afternoon, we parked near a trailhead by Sioux Narrows, slung on our packs, and started hiking toward the tower, the air thick with the smell of damp leaves. The trail was a nightmare, muddy, overgrown, with roots waiting to trip you. My boots were soaked in minutes, and I was already regretting not bringing better gear. Leo led the way, cracking jokes about Sasquatch sightings, but Mara was quieter, her camera slung around her neck like a shield. After an hour, we saw it. The lookout tower, a rusted skeleton perched on a rocky hill, its metal frame leaning slightly, like it might topple in a strong wind. It looked straight out of a horror movie, all jagged edges and faded paint. My stomach did a little flip, half excitement, half dread. We climbed the creaky stairs, each step whining under our weight, and I kept glancing back, feeling like the forest was watching. The tower's observation room was a wreck, broken windows, graffiti scrawled in jagged letters, and a stale, musty smell. I dropped my pack, trying to act cool, but this place was creepy as hell. Mara started snapping photos, muttering about the energy here, while Leo poked around, finding an old rusted lantern that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. We set up camp inside, rolling out sleeping bags on the gritty floor. I got a small propane stove going for some instant noodles, the hiss of it weirdly comforting. The view was insane, miles of trees stretching to the horizon, the lake glinting in the distance, but it felt too exposed, like we were on display. As the sun dipped, the temperature plummeted, and the tower started creaking like it was alive. I laughed it off, saying it was just the wind, but my heart wasn't in it. Mara kept pausing, staring out the windows, her camera forgotten. She said she felt off, like the air was too heavy. Leo brushed it aside, saying she was just spooked by the isolation, but I saw him double-check the trapdoor to the stairs. We cracked open some beers, trying to keep things light, but the vibe was shifting. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no rustling, just this eerie stillness that made my skin prickle. We played a card game to distract ourselves, but it wasn't working. Leo kept fumbling his cards, his usual swagger gone, and Mara was barely playing, her eyes darting to the windows. I tried to joke about how we'd tell everyone we survived a haunted tower, but it fell flat. I kept thinking about that forum post, how someone warned about bad vibes in these old towers. At the time, I thought it was just dramatic nonsense, but now I wasn't so sure. The creaking got louder, like something was pressing against the tower's frame. I told myself it was nothing, but my gut was screaming otherwise. By 10 p.m., we were all on edge. Mara swore she saw something move in the trees, a quick shadow, gone before she could point it out. Leo laughed, but it was forced, and he kept glancing at the trapdoor. I zipped up my hoodie, trying to shake the chill that wasn't just from the cold. The tower felt like a cage, too high up, too open, with those broken windows letting in every gust. I kept my flashlight close, its beam weak against the dark. Something about this place felt wrong, like we'd stumbled into somewhere we didn't belong. I tried to push it down, but the horror was creeping in, slow and steady. We decided to turn in, hoping sleep would reset us. I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the rusted ceiling, the beams barely visible in the moonlight. Leo was snoring within minutes, but Mara was wide awake, sitting up with her camera in her lap. I whispered, asking if she was okay, but she just shook her head, her face pale. That look sent a shiver through me, like she'd seen something I hadn't. I wanted to ask more, but my eyes were heavy, the exhaustion pulling me under. As I drifted off, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on metal, coming from somewhere below the tower. The tapping grew louder, deliberate, like someone, or something, was testing the stairs. My heart jumped, but I was too tired to move, my body betraying me. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe an animal, but it didn't feel right. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling we'd made a mistake coming here. That forum warning kept echoing in my head. Some towers aren't abandoned, they're waiting. I closed my eyes, praying it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew something disturbing was out there, lurking in the dark. I jolted awake, my sleeping bag tangled around my legs. The tapping was louder now, sharp and rhythmic, like someone hammering a nail into the tower's metal frame. My watch glowed 2:37 a.m., and the air was so cold my teeth chattered. Mara was already up, her flashlight beam darting across the room, her face pale as moonlight. "Tessa, you hear that?" she whispered, her voice shaky. I nodded, my heart pounding. Leo was still out, sprawled like a log, oblivious. The tapping stopped, then started again, closer, like it was climbing the stairs. The horror of it sank into my bones. This wasn't the wind or some raccoon. Something was out there, and it felt way too deliberate, way too wrong. I shook Leo awake, hissing his name. He grumbled, then froze when he heard the tapping. "What the hell is that?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Mara pointed her flashlight at the trapdoor, the beam trembling. I wanted to scream at her to turn it off. Light could draw attention, but I was too scared to speak. My big mistake was thinking this tower was just a cool, creepy spot. Now it felt like a trap, exposed on all sides with those broken windows. We whispered about what to do, stay put or check it out. Going down those stairs in the dark sounded like a death wish, but sitting here felt just as bad. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a machine idling deep in the forest. It wasn't natural, not out here in Lake of the Woods. I thought of those old stories about weird experiments in the wilderness, like Cold War bunkers or secret labs gone wrong. Stupid, I know, but my mind was grasping at anything to explain this. Mara whispered she'd seen that shadow again, moving between the trees, too quick to be human. Leo scoffed, saying it was probably just a deer, but his hands were shaking as he grabbed his flashlight. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my chest, and I couldn't shake the disturbing feeling we weren't alone. We decided to stay put until dawn, figuring daylight would make things less scary. I kept my flashlight off, clutching my pathetic little multi-tool like it could do anything. Mara had her camera out, like she might snap a picture of whatever was creeping around. Leo kept pacing, muttering about how he should have brought his hunting knife. I felt like an idiot for dragging us here. My dumb idea, my fault. The tower creaked with every gust, each sound making me jump. I kept thinking about that forum post, the one warning about things that don't leave you alone. Why hadn't I listened? Then we heard it, a slow, deliberate scrape, like something dragging across the ground below. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the wind, wasn't an animal. I crawled to the window, peering through the fogged glass. Nothing but trees and shadows, but the hum was louder now, almost rhythmic, like a chant. Mara whispered it sounded like machinery, but what kind would be out here? I thought of those creepy stories about abandoned mines in Ontario, equipment left running in the dark. The idea made my skin crawl. Leo suggested it was just a generator, maybe park rangers, but at 3 a.m.? No chance. We argued in whispers about our next move. Leo wanted to make a run for the Subaru, saying we could drive out before things got worse. Mara snapped that running blind was how people got lost in these woods forever, like those hikers you hear about who vanish without a trace. I sided with her, barely. My heart was screaming to bolt, but the trail was a maze, and that scraping sound felt too close. I kept picturing us stumbling through the dark, whatever was out there picking us off one by one, like some horror flick where the group never makes it. The tower was our only shelter, but it felt more like a cage every second. The scraping stopped, and the silence was worse, heavy and thick, like the air itself was waiting. I kept glancing at the trapdoor, expecting it to fly open. Mara was gripping her camera so tight her knuckles were white, and Leo was crouched by the stove, like he might use it as a weapon. My mind kept replaying my mistakes, not researching the tower better, not bringing a real map, not telling anyone where we were going. Classic dumb move, right? Like every horror story where the group thinks they're invincible. The hum pulsed again, closer, and I swore I saw something move outside, just beyond the glass. We huddled together, trying to stay calm, but it wasn't working. Leo knocked over a water bottle, the splash loud enough to make us all flinch. Mara hissed at him to be quiet, her eyes wide with terror. I wanted to laugh, to break the tension, but my throat was too tight. The tower felt smaller, the walls pressing in, the broken windows letting in every creepy vibe from the forest. I kept thinking about how isolated we were. No cell service, no one for miles. If something happened, No one would find us. The hum was steady now, like it was daring us to move. By 4 a.m., the sky was graying, but the fog was thick, making everything look like a blurry nightmare. We were exhausted, nerves shot, but sleep wasn't an option. The scraping came again, slower, like whatever it was knew we were listening. I whispered we had to stick together, no matter what. Splitting up is how you die in horror stories, right? Like every dumb slasher movie. Mara nodded, but Leo looked like he was ready to bolt. I couldn't blame him, but I had a sinking feeling that whatever was out there was waiting for us to make a move, and we were running out of time. The fog was so thick I could barely see the trees, but something moved out there, sharp, jerky, like a glitch in reality. My breath caught, and I grabbed Mara's arm, pointing. She saw it too, her camera slipping from her hands, clattering on the floor. Leo cursed, scrambling to the window, his flashlight beam slicing through the haze. It was no animal, no ranger, just a shape, too tall, too thin, flickering in and out of the fog like it wasn't fully there. The horror hit me like a punch. This wasn't some hiker or prank. Something was seriously, disturbingly wrong, and it was right below our tower. My heart pounded so hard I thought it had burst, the air thick with a sick, electric buzz. We ducked low, like that'd hide us in this fishbowl of a tower. The hum was louder now, vibrating the metal floor, making my teeth ache. Leo whispered it might be a drone, some jerk messing with us, but Mara shook her head, her voice barely audible. "That's not a drone," she said, her eyes wide. "I thought of those creepy Ontario legends, things in the woods that aren't human, aren't animal. I'd laughed them off in Regina, but now they felt too real." The shape moved again, closer, and I caught a glimpse of something metallic in its hand, glinting in the faint dawn light. My stomach twisted. Whatever it wasn't playing around. The tower shook, a hard jolt that sent our gears sliding. I grabbed the wall, my multi-tool useless in my shaking hand. Mara stifled a scream, and Leo was muttering prayers, which I didn't even know he knew. That scraping sound came again, slow and deliberate, like it was climbing the stairs. My mind flashed to horror movies like The Thing, where the monster's always one step ahead, but this was worse, real, raw, and right here. I kept thinking about my dumb choice to camp in this tower, ignoring every warning on that forum. Now we were trapped, with something unnatural circling below. We scrambled to the trapdoor, piling our packs against it, but it was a joke of a barricade. The scraping stopped, replaced by a low, guttural rasp, like air hissing through broken pipes. It was right outside the trapdoor, and I swear I felt its presence, heavy and wrong, like it was pressing through the metal. Mara was crying softly, clutching her camera like it could save her. Leo grabbed the old lantern we'd found, holding it like a club. My heart was screaming to run, but where? The Subaru was a mile away, and that thing was between us and the trail. I risked a glance through a broken window, my breath fogging the glass. The shape was at the base of the tower now, still, like it was waiting. Its outline was all wrong. Limbs too long, head tilted at an angle that made my skin crawl. I thought of those missing camper stories in Lake of the Woods, people vanishing with no trace, just a shoe or a bag left behind. Like that family in 2020, gone after a night hike, their tent untouched. My fault for bringing us here, for thinking this was just a cool adventure. The rasp came again, closer, like it was tasting the air. The tower shook again, harder, and the trapdoor rattled like something was testing it. Leo swung the lantern, yelling for whatever it was to back off, but his voice cracked, all bravado gone. Mara whispered we should signal for help, but our phones were useless. No bars, no hope. I cursed myself for not bringing a flare or even a loud whistle. The hum was deafening now, pulsing like a heartbeat, and I felt it in my chest, like it was syncing with my fear. The thing outside moved, circling the tower, its metallic glint flashing in the fog. It was toying with us, and the terror was suffocating. We crouched in the center of the room, away from the windows, our breath shallow. The rasp turned into a high, keening wail, like a machine breaking down, or something alive, mimicking one. My mind raced. Maybe it was some experiment gone wrong, something left in these woods from decades ago. I'd read about old military tests in Ontario, weird tech abandoned in the wild. But this felt older, hungrier. Leo was shaking, whispering we should have stayed in Kenora. Mara's eyes were locked on the trapdoor, like she expected it to burst open. I wanted to say something brave, but I was frozen, the horror sinking deeper. The wail stopped, and the silence was worse, like the world was holding its breath. I kept waiting for another jolt, another sound, but nothing came. It was like the thing knew we were trapped and was savoring it. I thought of the Subaru, so close yet so far, and how we'd never make it without running into that thing. My mistakes piled up, not checking the tower's history, not telling anyone our plans, dragging Leo and Mara into this. The air felt charged, like a storm about to break, and I knew whatever was out there wasn't done with us. Then the trapdoor creaked, a slow, deliberate push, like something was easing it open. My heart stopped. Leo lunged, slamming his weight against it, but the force on the other side was stronger, the metal groaning. Mara screamed, and I grabbed her, pulling her back. The hum was everywhere now, drowning out everything, and I saw that shape again, just outside the window, its long limbs twitching. It wasn't just one thing. I swear I saw another shadow behind it, moving in the fog. We were surrounded, and the terror was absolute, like the forest itself wanted us gone. The trapdoor buckled, metal screaming as something pushed harder. My heart was in my throat, and I yelled for Leo to hold it down. He was leaning on it, face red, but the force was too strong. "We gotta go," I screamed, grabbing Mara's arm. The Subaru was our only shot, a mile through the fog-choked woods. That wail pierced the air again, so sharp it hurt, and I knew staying meant death. We shoved the trapdoor open, the hum deafening, vibrating in my bones. I went first, slipping on the rusted stairs, my multi-tool useless in my hand. The horror was suffocating. This thing, whatever it was right behind us, and we were running blind into a nightmare. My boots hit the ground, mud sucking at my soles. Mara was right behind me, her camera banging against her chest, and Leo stumbled down last, still clutching that old lantern. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet, the trees looming like ghosts. That shape flickered in the haze, its long limbs twitching, and I swear I saw another behind it. My mind flashed to horror movies like Alien, where the monsters always faster, smarter. We sprinted toward the trail, branches clawing my face, my lungs burning. The hum followed, pulsing like a heartbeat, and I knew we were being hunted, the forest itself turning against us. The trail was a mess, roots and rocks tripping us at every step. Leo was panting, falling behind, his lantern swinging wildly. "Keep up," I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the fog. Mara grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with terror, urging me to keep going. Then we heard it, a sharp crack, like wood splintering, and Leo yelped. I spun around, and he was gone, just a shadow swallowed by the haze. My heart sank. "Leo," I screamed, but Mara pulled me forward, saying we couldn't stop. The guilt hit hard. I dragged him here, my stupid idea, and now he was gone. We kept running, the Subaru's clearing so close I could almost taste it. The wail was right behind us, mixed with that metallic scrape, like blades on stone. I thought of those stories about Lake of the Woods, hunters finding weird carvings or abandoned gear, signs of something older than the park. My fault for ignoring them. Mara tripped, her camera skidding into the mud, and I hauled her up, my hands shaking. The shapes were closing in, their jerky movements like broken puppets. I couldn't tell how many there were, 2, 3? The terror was choking me, but the clearing was just ahead, our last hope. The Subaru loomed through the fog, a rusted lifeline. I fumbled for my keys, dropping them in the dirt. "Come on," Mara hissed, her voice cracking as she scanned the trees. I grabbed the keys, hands slick with sweat, and we dove into the car. The engine sputtered but caught, and I floored it, tires spinning on the muddy trail. The hum was everywhere, like it was inside the car, and I saw them in the rearview mirror, those tall, twitching shapes, keeping pace. My stomach lurched. They weren't human, weren't anything I could understand, and they were fast, too fast. The road twisted, my headlights barely cutting through the fog. Mara was crying, muttering about Leo, how we left him. Guilt clawed at me. I'd picked this tower, ignored the warnings, brought us to this horror show. The wail was fainter now, but the hum never stopped, vibrating in my chest. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting those things to leap onto the car. The park's main road was close, maybe a mile, and I clung to that thought. But the forest felt alive, branches scraping the Subaru like fingers, and I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't escaping, just delaying the inevitable. We hit a straight stretch, and I pushed the Subaru harder, the engine groaning. Mara was gripping the door, her face pale, whispering we should have stayed together. I wanted to argue, but she was right. Splitting up, even for a second, had cost us Leo. My mind kept replaying his yell, the way he vanished. The hum pulsed louder, like it was mocking us, and I saw something dart across the road ahead, too quick to make out. My heart stopped, but I kept driving, praying the park gate was close. The fog was thinning, but the terror wasn't. It felt like those things were everywhere, waiting. I swerved to avoid a fallen branch, the Subaru fishtailing. Mara screamed, pointing at the trees. Another shape, closer, its metallic glint catching the headlights. It wasn't running anymore, just standing there, watching. I floored the gas, the car shaking as we sped toward the gate. The hum was a roar now, drowning out Mara's sobs. I thought of every dumb choice I'd made. Not researching the tower, not telling anyone our plans, thinking this was just a fun adventure. The gate was in sight, but it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a trap, like those things were hurting us somewhere worse. We were almost there, the gate's lights flickering through the fog. I let myself hope, just for a second, that we'd make it. Then the engine coughed, the dashboard lights blinking wildly. My heart sank. No, not now. The Subaru slowed, smoke curling from under the hood. Mara was screaming at me to keep going, but the car was dying, and the hum was louder than ever. Those shapes were out there, circling, their long limbs twitching in the dark. We were so close, but the horror was closing in, and I knew we weren't getting out of this unscathed. The Subaru rolled to a stop, the engine dead, smoke choking the air. I slammed the steering wheel, cursing my luck. Why hadn't I checked the damn car in Regina? Mara was hyperventilating, her hands shaking as she gripped the door. The park gate was maybe 100 yards away, its lights mocking us through the fog. The hum was everywhere, a low, cruel pulse that felt like it was inside my skull. I thought of Leo, his scream echoing in my head, and the guilt was crushing. This was my fault, my stupid tower obsession, my half-assed planning. The horror of it all was suffocating, and those things were out there, waiting for us to make our next move. I grabbed Mara's hand, saying we had to run for the gate. She nodded, tears streaking her face, but her eyes were sharp, like she was ready to fight. We grabbed our flashlights and bolted from the car, the cold air biting my lungs. The hum turned into that wail again, sharp and unnatural, like a machine screaming. My legs burned as we sprinted, the gate so close I could see the rusted chain link. But the forest was alive, shadows moving in the fog, those tall, twitching shapes closing in. I thought of those missing camper stories, how no one ever found them, just empty tents and dread. The ground was slick, and I slipped, scraping my hands on the gravel. Mara pulled me up, her flashlight beam wild, catching a glimpse of one of those things, its limbs too long, its face a blur, like it didn't belong in this world. My heart stopped, but we kept running, the gate just steps away. I kept picturing horror movies where the survivors almost make it, like The Descent, but this was worse, real, raw, and relentless. My mistake was thinking we could outrun this, that we could escape something that felt older than the forest itself. We reached the gate, my hands fumbling with the chain. It was locked, of course, why wouldn't it be? Mara was screaming at me to hurry, her voice drowned out by the wail. I kicked at the gate, desperate, but it wouldn't budge. The shapes were closer now, their metallic glints flashing in the fog. I thought of every dumb choice, trusting that forum, dragging Leo and Mara here, ignoring the signs. The hum was deafening, like it was laughing at us. Mara grabbed a rock, smashing at the lock, but it was useless. We were trapped, and the terror was absolute. One of the things stepped into the light, its body jerking like a broken machine. Its face wasn't a face, just a smear of shadow, like static. My knees buckled, but Mara yanked me back, yelling to run along the fence. We sprinted, looking for a gap, but the fog was choking, the wail right behind us. I kept thinking of Leo, how we'd left him, how I'd failed him. My flashlight caught another shape, then another. They were everywhere, hurting us like prey. Mara's hand was slick with sweat, and I clung to it, knowing we were running out of time. We found a break in the fence, a jagged gap just wide enough to slip through. I pushed Mara ahead, my heart pounding as the wail turned into a screech, so close it felt like it was inside me. We stumbled onto the main road, the fog thinning, but the shapes were right there, their long limbs reaching. I threw my flashlight, a pathetic distraction, but it bought us a second. Mara was gasping, her face pale, and I knew we couldn't keep this up. My ankle twisted on a rock, pain shooting through me, but I kept moving, driven by pure terror. The road stretched ahead, endless and dark, no cars, no help. The screeching was relentless, and I felt those things closing in, their hum like a death knell. Mara tripped, her knee hitting the pavement, and I hauled her up, my own strength fading. I thought of every horror story where the group makes one last mistake, and I knew this was ours, running blind, thinking we could escape. The shapes were on us now, their limbs twitching, their blurred faces looming. I screamed for Mara to keep going, but her hand slipped from mine, and the screech drowned out everything. I don't know how long I ran, but my lungs were fire, my vision blurring. The gate was behind us, but the forest was alive, those things everywhere. I turned, and Mara was gone, just a shadow swallowed by the fog. My heart broke. I'd lost them both, Leo and Mara, because of my stupid plan. The hum was in my head now, a cruel, mocking pulse. One of the things stood ahead, blocking the road, its body jerking like a glitch. I froze, no fight left, the horror overwhelming. My last thought was of that forum warning, some towers are waiting, and how I'd brought us to our end. The screech was the last thing I heard, a sound that wasn't sound, tearing through me. I fell to my knees, the pavement cold, the shapes closing in. I thought of Regina, my boring desk job, how I'd wanted adventure. Now I had it, and it was a tragedy, a cruel, final mistake. The hum swallowed me, the world fading, and I knew no one would find us. Just another story lost in Lake of the Woods, another warning for someone else to ignore. I'm Rowan Caldwell, 29 years old, and I live in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Last spring, I got this itch to camp in an abandoned fire lookout tower in Killarney Provincial Park, down south in Ontario. I'd stumbled across a blog post about these old towers, relics from the days when rangers watched for wildfires, now left to rust in the wilderness. It sounded like a creepy thrill, perfect for a weekend escape. I packed my trusty Honda CR-V with gear, a thermos of coffee, and a sketchy map I'd printed from some obscure hiking forum. My friend Sienna, a 26-year-old barista with a sharp sense of humor, and her brother Dax, a 31-year-old carpenter with a quiet edge, joined me. We met in Sudbury, then drove into Killarney, the road winding through rugged hills. The drive was gorgeous but eerie, the park's granite cliffs and pines closing in as the sun dipped low. Sienna kept joking about getting eaten by bears, while Dax just stared out the window, his jaw tight. I was buzzing with excitement, but I'll admit, my camping skills are pretty basic. Think hot dogs and a cheap tent. The tower's coordinates were from that forum, not exactly a ranger-approved guide, and I was starting to second-guess my plan. We parked near George Lake, grabbed our packs, and started hiking. The trail was rough, all rocks and roots, and the air smelled sharp, like wet stone and pine. My boots crunched, and I felt the forest watching us, quiet and heavy. The hike was brutal, my pack digging into my shoulders. Sienna was griping about the mud, but Dax just plowed ahead, like he was on a mission. After 2 hours, we spotted the tower, a rusted metal skeleton perched on a granite ridge, its frame sagging like it was tired of standing. It looked straight out of a horror flick, all sharp angles and peeling paint. My heart did a little flip, half thrill, half dread. We climbed the creaky stairs, each step groaning like it might give way. The view from the top was unreal. Lakes glinting through the trees, hills rolling forever, but it felt exposed, like we were perched in a spotlight for the whole park to see. The observation room was a mess. Broken glass, graffiti scrawled in faded marker, and a damp, musty smell that clung to everything. I dropped my pack, trying to play it cool, but this place was creepy as hell. Sienna started snapping selfies, laughing about how we'd spook our friends with haunted tower pics. Dax was quieter, poking around, finding an old logbook under some debris, its pages yellowed and curling. We set up our sleeping bags, fired up a propane stove for some chili, and tried to settle in. The normalcy of eating and joking felt good, but the tower's thin walls rattled with every gust, and I couldn't shake a bad vibe. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast, the cold seeping through my jacket. Sienna was still joking, but her eyes kept darting to the windows, like she felt it too. Dax was fiddling with the logbook, squinting at the faded handwriting. He said it mentioned weird weather patterns, entries cut off mid-sentence. I laughed it off, saying it was just old ranger nonsense, but my stomach twisted. The forest was dead silent. No crickets, no owls, just this heavy quiet that made my skin prickle. I kept thinking about that blog post, how it warned about strange happenings in Killarney's towers. I'd brushed it off as clickbait, but now I wasn't so sure. We played cards to pass the time, but the vibe was off. Sienna kept fumbling her deals, her usual chatter fading, and Dax was barely playing, his eyes on the trapdoor to the stairs. I tried to keep things light, joking about how we'd brag about surviving a ghost tower to our friends. But the truth? I was starting to feel it, that horror movie sense that we weren't alone. The tower felt like a cage, all rusted metal and broken windows, letting in every gust of wind. I kept my flashlight close, its weak beam barely cutting through the dark. Something about this place felt wrong, like we'd trespassed somewhere we shouldn't have. By 11 p.m., the cold was brutal, and the tower's creaks were getting to us. Sienna swore she saw something move outside, a quick flicker, like a light switching on and off in the trees. Dax told her it was just her imagination, but he double-checked the trapdoor, his hands steady but his face tense. I zipped up my sleeping bag, trying to shake the chill that wasn't just from the cold. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. I kept thinking about that logbook, those cut-off entries. What had the Rangers seen out here? The thought sent a shiver through me, and I told myself to chill. It was just a creepy old tower, right? We decided to turn in, hoping sleep would calm our nerves. I lay there, staring at the rusted ceiling, the beams barely visible in the moonlight. Sienna was tossing and turning, her sleeping bag rustling, while Dax sat up, still flipping through that logbook like it held answers. I whispered, asking if he was okay, but he just shook his head, his face pale. That look made my stomach drop, like he'd read something he wasn't sharing. I wanted to press him, but exhaustion was winning, pulling me under. As I drifted off, I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thump, like something heavy hitting the ground below the tower. The thumping grew louder, steady, like footsteps climbing the stairs. My eyes snapped open, heart racing, but I was too frozen to move. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling we'd made a mistake coming here. That blog post echoed in my head. Some towers aren't empty, they're waiting. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe an animal, but it didn't feel right. The thumping stopped, then started again, closer, and I knew something disturbing was out there, lurking in the dark, ready to make itself known. I bolted upright, the thumping louder now, like someone was pounding the tower's base with a sledgehammer. My watch glowed 3:12 a.m., and the cold was brutal, my breath fogging in the dark. Sienna was awake, her flashlight shaking as she aimed it at the trapdoor. "Rowan, you hear that?" she whispered, her voice tight. I nodded, my heart hammering. Dax was already up, clutching that old logbook, his face pale as he stared at the stairs. The thumping stopped, then came again, heavier, like it was climbing. The horror of it sank in. This wasn't some animal or wind. Something was out there, and it felt way too intentional, way too wrong for this lonely tower. I grabbed my flashlight, my hands sweaty despite the chill. "We need to check it out," I said, but my voice cracked, betraying my fear. Sienna shook her head, saying going down was insane, but Dax was already moving toward the trapdoor, his jaw set. I cursed myself for picking this place, some dumb adventure based on a sketchy blog post. The tower felt like a trap, its rusted walls creaking with every gust. We argued in whispers, stay put or investigate. The thumping was relentless now, and I knew sitting here wasn't safe either. My gut screamed to stay, but the unknown was eating at me. The thumping stopped, replaced by a low, eerie hum, like a distant engine buried in the forest. It wasn't natural, not out here in Killarney. I thought of those urban legends about secret experiments in the Canadian wilderness, old tech left to rot. Stupid, maybe, but it fit the vibe. Sienna whispered she'd seen that flicker again, a quick light in the trees, closer than before. Dax grunted, saying it was probably just a camper, but his eyes were wide, and he gripped the logbook like a shield. The hum grew louder, vibrating the floor, and the air felt thick, like it was pressing us down, heavy with something disturbing. We decided to wait for dawn, hoping daylight would make things less scary. I kept my flashlight off, scared it'd draw attention, my pathetic multi-tool clenched in my fist. Sienna was clutching her phone, even though it had no signal, like it could somehow save us. Dax was flipping through the logbook again, muttering about entries mentioning lights and shapes in the woods. I wanted to tell him to stop, that he was freaking us out, but I was too spooked. The tower creaked, each sound making me flinch. That blog post's warning, "Some towers aren't empty," kept looping in my head. Why hadn't I listened? Then we heard it, a slow, grinding scrape, like metal dragging across stone below. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the wind, wasn't a branch. I crawled to the window, peering through the cracked glass, but the fog was too thick, hiding everything. The hum was louder, almost rhythmic, like a chant. Sienna whispered it sounded like machinery, but what kind would be out here? I thought of those stories about abandoned mines in Ontario, equipment left running in the dark. The idea made my skin crawl. Dax suggested it was just park maintenance, but at 3 a.m.? No way. The scrape came again, closer, like it was circling the tower. We whispered about our options, voices low. Dax wanted to make a run for the CRV, saying we could drive out before things got worse. Sienna snapped that running blind was how people got lost in Killarney, like those hikers who vanished without a trace. I sided with her, but I was second-guessing everything. The trail was a maze, and that scraping felt too close. My mind kept picturing us stumbling through the dark, whatever was out there picking us off, like some horror flick where the group never learns. The tower was our shelter, but it felt more like a coffin every second. The scraping stopped, and the silence was worse, heavy and suffocating, like the forest was waiting. I kept glancing at the trapdoor, expecting it to burst open. Sienna knocked over her water bottle, the splash loud enough to make us all jump. Dax hissed at her to be quiet, his eyes wild. I wanted to laugh, to break the tension, but my throat was dry. The tower's walls felt closer, the broken windows letting in every creepy vibe from the woods. We were so isolated. No cell service, no one for miles. If something happened, we were on our own, and that thought was pure horror. By 4:30 a.m., the sky was graying, but the fog was thicker, making the world look like a blurry nightmare. We were exhausted, nerves frayed, but sleep was impossible. The hum pulsed steadily, like it was taunting us. Dax was still clutching the logbook, saying one entry mentioned they come at night. I told him to shut up, but my voice shook. My mistakes were piling up, not researching this place, not bringing a real map, dragging Sienna and Dax into my dumb plan. The scrape came again, slow and deliberate, and I swore I saw a shadow move outside, just beyond the glass. We huddled together, trying to stay calm, but it wasn't working. Sienna was gripping her phone so tight her knuckles were white, and Dax was by the trapdoor, like he might bolt any second. I whispered we had to stick together, no matter what. Splitting up is how you die in horror stories, right? Like every slasher movie where the group scatters. Sienna nodded, but Dax looked ready to run. The hum was louder now, almost alive, and I felt it in my chest, like it was daring us to move. Something was out there, and it wasn't just watching. It was closing in, and we were running out of time. The fog was so dense I could barely see the trees, but something moved out there, fast, jagged, like a shadow breaking apart. My breath hitched, and I grabbed Sienna's arm, pointing. She gasped, her flashlight dropping with a clatter. Dax lunged to the window, his beam catching a glimpse of it. Tall, too tall, with limbs that bent wrong, like a marionette gone haywire. The horror slammed into me. This wasn't a camper, not even an animal. Something was seriously, disturbingly wrong, and it was right below our tower. My heart pounded like a drum, the hum vibrating the floor, making my skin crawl. Whatever it wasn't just passing through, it was here for us. We crouched low, like that'd hide us in this rusted fishbowl. The hum was louder, a low buzz that felt like it was crawling inside my skull. Dax whispered it might be a prank, some locals screwing with us. But Sienna shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "That's not human," she said, eyes wide. I thought of those old Killarney legends, things in the woods that don't belong, spirits or worse. I'd scoffed at them in Thunder Bay, but now they felt too real. The shape moved again, closer, and I saw a glint, like metal or glass, in its hand. My stomach churned. It was armed, or something worse. The tower shook, a hard jolt that sent our gear sliding. I grabbed the wall, my multi-tool useless in my trembling hand. Sienna stifled a cry, and Dax was muttering curses, his tough guy act crumbling. The scraping came again, slow and deliberate, like it was climbing the stairs. My mind flashed to horror flicks like The Thing, where the monster's always one step ahead, but this was raw, real, and right here. My fault for picking this tower, for ignoring that blog's warnings. The hum turned into a low rasp, like air hissing through broken metal, right outside the trapdoor. It felt alive, heavy with malice. We scrambled to the trapdoor, piling our packs against it, but it was a pathetic barricade. The rasp grew sharper, a keening wail that made my ears ache. Sienna was crying now, clutching her phone like it could save her. Dax gripped the old logbook, saying it mentioned shapes that watch. I wanted to yell at him to stop, but I was too scared. My mind raced. Maybe it was some old experiment, something left in these woods from decades ago. I'd read about abandoned tech in Ontario, weird relics from the Cold War. But this felt older, hungrier, like it was feeding off our fear. I risked a glance through a cracked window, my breath fogging the glass. The shape was at the tower's base, still, like it was staring up. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at a sickening angle, like it wasn't bound by normal rules. I thought of those missing hiker stories in Killarney, people vanishing with just a backpack left behind, like that couple in 2018, gone without a trace. My mistake was thinking this was just a creepy adventure. The wail came again, closer, and I felt it in my chest, like it was tasting us. Dax whispered we should signal for help, but our phones were dead out here. No bars, no hope. The tower shook again, harder, and the trapdoor rattled, like something was pushing up. Dax threw his weight against it, yelling for it to back off, but his voice was shaky. Sienna was whispering to herself, some kind of mantra, her hands trembling. The hum was deafening, pulsing like a heartbeat, and I saw another shape in the fog, then another. My blood ran cold. They weren't alone. This wasn't one thing. It was a pack, circling us. My mind screamed to run, but where? The CRV was a mile away, and those things were between us and the trail. We huddled in the center of the room, away from the windows, our breath shallow. The wail turned into a screech, sharp and unnatural, like metal grinding on bone. I kept picturing those horror stories where the group ignores the signs and pays for it, like Blair Witch. My mistakes piled up, not researching this place, dragging Sienna and Dax here, thinking I could handle the wilderness. The trapdoor creaked, a slow push, like something was testing it. Dax slammed it down, but the force was stronger, the metal groaning. Sienna screamed, and I pulled her back, my heart racing. The air felt electric, like a storm about to break. The screech stopped, and the silence was worse, like the world was holding its breath. I kept waiting for another jolt, another sound, but nothing came. It was like those things knew we were trapped and were savoring it. I thought of the CRV, so far away, and how we'd never make it without running into them. My flashlight was off, scared it'd draw attention, but the faint dawn light showed those shapes outside, twitching in the fog. Sienna was shaking, whispering we should have stayed in Sudbury. I wanted to say something brave, but the terror was choking me, and I knew we were running out of time. Then the trapdoor buckled, a loud crack as something slammed into it. Dax yelled, his weight barely holding it down. The hum was everywhere, drowning out Sienna's sobs, and I saw one of those shapes at the window, its blurred face pressed against the glass. It wasn't human, not even close, just a smear of shadow, moving wrong. My mind blanked, the horror absolute. We were surrounded, the tower shaking like it might collapse, and I knew whatever was out there wasn't just hunting us, it was playing with us, and we had nowhere left to hide. The trapdoor splintered, a sickening crack as something slammed it again. My heart was in my throat, and I screamed for Dax to hold it down. He was leaning hard, veins bulging, but the force was too strong. We gotta run, I yelled, grabbing Sienna's arm. The CRV was our only shot, a mile through the fog-soaked woods. That screech ripped through the air, so close it felt like knives in my ears. Staying was death. We shoved the trapdoor open, the hum vibrating my bones. I went first, slipping on the rusted stairs, my multi-tool useless. The horror was suffocating, Those things were right there, and we were sprinting into a nightmare. No other choice. My boots hit the ground, mud sucking at my soles. Sienna was behind me, her phone clattering to the dirt, and Dax stumbled down, still clutching that logbook like it could save him. The fog was a wall, trees barely visible, but those shapes were out there, twitching and jerky, like broken machines. My mind flashed to horror flicks like Predator, where the hunter's always faster. We bolted for the trail, branches slashing my face, lungs burning. The hum followed, pulsing like a heartbeat, and I knew we were prey, the forest alive with something cruel and relentless. The trail was a mess, rocks and roots tripping us. Dax was lagging, his flashlight beam wild. "Keep up," I shouted, but the fog swallowed my voice. Sienna grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with terror, urging me on. Then a crack, wood snapping, and Dax screamed. I spun around, and he was gone, just a shadow in the haze. My heart sank. "Dax," I yelled, but Sienna yanked me forward, saying we couldn't stop. Guilt hit like a truck. I dragged him here, my stupid tower obsession, and now he was gone. The screech was closer, metal scraping stone, and I knew those things were right behind us. We kept running, the CRVS clearing so close I could see it through the fog. The wail was deafening, mixed with that grinding scrape, like blades on rock. Sienna tripped, her knee hitting a root, and I hauled her up, my hands shaking. Those shapes were everywhere, their long limbs twitching in the haze. I couldn't count them. 3, 4? The terror was choking, but the clearing was just ahead. I thought of those Killarney stories, hikers finding weird symbols carved in trees, signs of something ancient. My fault for ignoring them, thinking this was just a creepy thrill. The CRV loomed, a rusty lifeline. I fumbled my keys, dropping them in the mud. "Hurry," Sienna hissed, scanning the trees, her face pale. I grabbed the keys, hands slick, and we dove into the car. The engine roared, and I floored it, tires spinning. The hum was inside the car, vibrating my chest, and I saw them in the rearview mirror. Those tall, jerky shapes, keeping pace. My stomach lurched. They weren't human, weren't anything I could name, and they were fast. I swerved around a rock, the CRV shaking, praying we'd make it to the main road. The road twisted, headlights barely cutting the fog. Sienna was sobbing, muttering about Dax, how he left him. Guilt clawed at me. I'd picked this tower, ignored the blog warnings, brought us to this horror show. The wail faded, but the hum stayed, like a taunt. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting those things to leap onto the car. The main road was close, maybe a mile, and I clung to that hope. But the forest felt alive, branches scraping the CRV like claws, and I couldn't shake the feeling we weren't escaping, just being herded somewhere worse. We hit a straight stretch, and I pushed the CRV harder, the engine groaning. Sienna was gripping the door, whispering we should have stuck together. She was right, leaving Dax, even for a second, had cost us. My mind replayed his scream, the way he vanished. The hum pulsed louder, and something darted across the road, too quick to see. My heart stopped, but I kept driving, the park gate so close. The fog was thinning, but the terror wasn't. It felt like those things were everywhere, waiting for us to slip up. The gate's lights flickered ahead, and I let myself hope we'd make it. Then the CRV lurched, the dashboard blinking wildly. My heart sank. The engine was dying, smoke curling from the hood. Sienna screamed at me to keep going, but the car was slowing, the hum louder than ever. Those shapes were out there, circling, their metallic glints flashing in the fog. My mistakes piled up, not checking the car, not researching the tower, dragging my friends into this. We were so close, but the horror was closing in, and I knew we weren't getting out clean. We stumbled out of the CRV, the gate just yards away. I grabbed Sienna, pulling her toward it, the screech right behind us. The fog was thick, the hum drowning out everything, and those shapes were everywhere, twitching like glitches. I thought of every dumb choice, trusting that blog, thinking this was just a fun adventure. The gate was locked, of course, and I kicked at it, desperate. Sienna was crying, her hands bloody from a fall, and I knew we were running out of time. The horror was absolute, and those things were coming, their long limbs reaching through the fog. The CRV was dead, smoke choking the air, the gate's lights mocking us through the fog. My heart was pounding, guilt crushing me. I'd brought us here, my fault. Dax was gone. Sienna was shaking, her hands scraped raw, but her eyes were fierce, like she'd fight to the end. The hum was a roar, vibrating my skull, and the screech was closer, like metal tearing. We ran for the gate, my legs burning, but it was locked tight, chain link unyielding. I thought of those Killarney vanishings, hikers gone with no trace, just a hat or a shoe. The horror was suffocating, and I knew we'd made too many mistakes to outrun this. We sprinted along the fence, looking for a gap, the screech right behind us. My flashlight caught a shape, tall, limbs twitching, its face a blur, like static on a broken screen. My blood ran cold. Sienna grabbed a stick, swinging it wildly, but it was useless against those things. My mind flashed to horror movies like The Descent, where the group's trapped with no way out. This was worse, real, raw, and relentless. My fault for picking this tower, for ignoring every warning. The hum was everywhere, like it was laughing at us, hurting us deeper into the nightmare. The fence had a gap, a jagged tear just wide enough. I pushed Sienna through, my ankle twisting on a rock, pain shooting up my leg. The screech was deafening, and I saw them. 3, maybe 4 shapes, their long limbs jerking like broken toys. I thought of Dax, his scream, how I'd failed him. Sienna was yelling for me to hurry, but my ankle buckled, slowing me down. The forest was alive, branches snapping, the hum pulsing like a heartbeat. I crawled through the gap, Sienna pulling me, but those things were right there, their metallic glints flashing in the fog. We hit the main road. No cars, no help, just endless dark. Sienna was gasping, her stick gone, her hands bloody. The screech turned into a wail, so close it hurt. I kept picturing those stories, the carvings found in Killarney, signs of something ancient and cruel. My mistakes were a weight, not telling anyone our plans, trusting a sketchy blog, thinking I could handle this. We ran, but the shapes were faster, their blurred faces looming. I grabbed Sienna's hand, knowing we couldn't outrun them, but I couldn't stop trying. One of the things stepped onto the road, its body jerking, its face a smear of shadow. My heart stopped, terror choking me. Sienna screamed, swinging a rock, but it didn't flinch. I thought of every horror story where the group makes one last mistake, and this was ours, running blind, thinking we could escape. The hum was in my head, drowning out everything. Sienna's hand was slick, slipping from mine, and I yelled for her to stay close. The shapes were everywhere, circling, their limbs reaching like claws. We were so close to freedom, but it felt like a lie. The road stretched on, the fog thinning but the horror growing. I tripped, my ankle giving out, and Sienna hauled me up, her face pale with fear. The wail was relentless, and I saw another shape, then another. They were all around us, hurting us like prey. I thought of Thunder Bay, my quiet life, how I'd craved adventure. Now it was a tragedy, a cruel end I'd brought on us. The hum was deafening, the shapes closing in, their blurred faces watching. I screamed for Sienna to run, but her hand slipped, and the screech swallowed her cry. I don't know how long I stumbled forward, my vision blurring, lungs on fire. The shapes were right behind me, their metallic glints flashing. I thought of Dax and Sienna, how I'd lost them both, my fault for this stupid plan. The road was empty, the gate long behind us, but the forest was alive, those things everywhere. One stood ahead, blocking my path, its body twitching like a glitch. I froze, no fight left, the horror overwhelming. My last thought was of that blog warning, some towers are waiting, and how I'd ignored it, dooming us all. The screech was the last thing I heard, a sound that tore through me, not human, not machine, just wrong. I fell, the pavement cold, the shapes closing in. My mind replayed every mistake, dragging my friends here, not checking the CRV, thinking I could outsmart the wilderness. The hum swallowed me, the world fading, and I knew no one would find us. Just another story lost in Killarney's woods, another warning for someone else to ignore. The fog closed in, the shapes looming, their long limbs reaching. I thought of Sienna's laugh, Dax's quiet strength, and how I'd failed them. The horror was absolute, a cruel, final trap. My vision went dark, the hum pulsing like a heartbeat, and I felt the cold ground beneath me, the weight of a tragedy I'd caused. Killarney took us, and those things, whatever they were, made sure we'd never leave.